Chapter 402. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Enkidu quickly retreated and covered her chest with her hands. Although she looked like a young girl who was about to be violated and was trying to defend herself. As expected of Lord Hyunryong, to be able to sense my heart, Enkidu looked at Wu Ming with extreme vigilance and sneered. As expected, Enkidu's heart is the holy grail of this singularity. However, Wu Ming shook his head and covered his chest with his hand. You can feel it too, right? My heart is also a holy grail. Wu Ming was based on the holy grail that formed the singularity of Fuyuki City. With it as the heart, he formed the rider, cavalry, class spirit base. Although Enkidu hit it well, the holy grail of the Winterwood City singularity and other singularities were somewhat related. Wu Ming already felt a sense of familiarity when Enkidu arrived, and only now did he confirm that it was the holy grail. Now that you mention it, I feel it too. Enkidu also looked at Wu Ming's chest and could vaguely see a holy grail that was beating like a heart. Since you already know, I can only leave, Enkidu said as she prepared to leave. But the moment she turned around, she stopped and looked at Wu Ming. As mother's child, and with the feelings of this body, I don't want you to die. Let me give you a piece of advice, Lord Hyunryong. Give up on the humans and join our side. After saying that, Enkidu began to retreat. At the same time, countless monsters appeared behind Enkidu to provide cover. Wu Ming did not chase Enkidu and let her leave. Woof and Baba walked in front of Wu Ming and protected Wu Ming behind him. Although there was no need to protect him with his master's ability, he couldn't allow these small fries to harass his master. Baba released its vines to kill the magic beasts that were rushing over. The magic beasts were not afraid of death and resolutely continued to charge. Wu Ming stood behind Baba and watched Enkidu disappear into the crowd of magical beasts. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, a gentle voice sounded. Aren't you going to stop it? Wu Ming's golden chains made a sound. There's no need for that. Even if we eliminate this singularity now, that guy will definitely find a way to send us another holy grail. Wu Ming shook his head. Besides, that's your body, so I can't really do it. Wu Ming smiled embarrassedly. Master Wu Ming, you're really gentle. The chains shook gently and then became silent. Well, it's time to clean up these items. Wu Ming said and joined the slaughter of the magic beasts. Later, with the cooperation of Wu Ming and Baba, the magic beasts that gathered in the north of Babylon were all killed. After that, Wu Ming rode Baba toward the north, but the magic beasts seemed to be scared and almost disappeared. In the afternoon, Wu Ming rode Baba back to Babylon. After being welcomed by the excited people and soldiers, Wu Ming entered the meeting hall of the servants. Leaving Baba in the huge open space outside the meeting hall, Wu Ming walked into the meeting hall. Clap, clap, clap. As soon as Wu Ming entered the meeting hall, he heard the sound of applause. As expected of the patron saint of Uruk, the teacher of the ancient king, the great and mysterious figure known as Hyunryong. Then, Shiro Amakusa's flattering voice came. With the help of Hyunryong-sama, we will be able to destroy the magic beasts. Ba Yuzan said with a voice like that of Yamato. Well, Hyunryong-sama is as reliable as Takaka-san and Kondo-san. No, more reliable than them. Okita Soki said with a smile. You must be referring to the bravest man in the world. It's hard to believe that if there was someone like you in the battle at Hot Spring Gate, the outcome would have been different than mine, Leonidas, whose face was hidden by the helmet, said. However, Wu Ming just smiled at these praises, then shook his head. You must be joking, those magic beasts are just some miscellaneous soldiers. They are all the inferior mass-produced children of Tiamat's magical beasts. They can't even be considered as living creatures, they can only be regarded as tools. If the real Tiamat's magical beasts appear, I'm afraid they won't be weaker than the servants. Wu Ming didn't get carried away by the praises of the servants because he knew that these magic beasts were just simple miscellaneous soldiers. They relied on their numbers to gain an advantage. Even Shiro Amakusa and the others had no problem killing these magic beasts if they had an unlimited supply of magic power. Of course, in addition to the magic power, there was another point. Shiro Amakusa and the others were there to protect the people, not to attack the enemy, so there was no need to be like Wu Ming. More importantly, the number and variety of magic beasts is likely to increase again. With Tiamat's continuous optimization of magic beasts, the magic beasts may become stronger and stronger. In the later stage, whether it's the number or quality of magic beasts, I'm afraid that a single servant can't kill them alone. Wu Ming said slightly solemnly. The others also realized this problem, and their faces were full of seriousness. About this problem, King Gilgamesh has already sent news. At this time, Shiro Amakusa spoke. Last night, Mr. Fuma went to Uruk overnight and conveyed the news of the current frontline to King Gilgamesh. Then, King Gilgamesh made a plan overnight and asked Mr. Fuma to bring it back. On the other side of the meeting hall, Fuma Kotaro appeared from the shadows as if to confirm Shiro Amakusa's words. Shiro Amakusa took out the information that Fuma Kotaro handed in last night. King Gilgamesh's new order is for servants to put down their work and help speed up the construction of the northern wall. Move the people who stayed in Babylon and Nippur to the back of the northern wall as soon as possible and complete the magic beast front. Shiro Amakusa read the content on the clay board. But, who will resist the magic beasts here? There are also the people who survived in the cities. There are also a few cities that we have confirmed that there are still people left. Okita Soki said with some confusion. In this regard, before Shiro Amakusa could speak, Wu Ming laughed first. I will defend the front line alone, including the rescue of the remaining people. The other servants and soldiers will go to the northern wall. Is that what King Gilgamesh said? Wu Ming said with great certainty as if he guessed Gilgamesh's meaning. Shiro Amakusa laughed. As expected of Hyunryong, Sama, the king's teacher. That's right, for the time being, Hyunryong, Sama will take over the defense of the front line, and the rescue work will be the same. King Gilgamesh said in the letter, this king's teacher is there, you can let him take over. This is how teachers are used at this time. Don't worry, he is much more useful than you. That's what King Gilgamesh meant. Shiro Amakusa finished reading. What a cruel king. He actually let his own teacher take over. If he was in the Shinsengumi, he would definitely be resisted. Okita Soki said with some helplessness. Well, but Hyunryong, Sama is indeed more useful than us. It is a great honor to be able to get the help of Hyunryong. Leonidas smiled casually at Gilgamesh's ridicule in the letter. Then, let's do it this way. Some of you will cover the residents of Babylon and Nippur to leave here. Some of you will go back to the northern wall to help build the wall. I will defend the front line. Ruler, tell me the location of the remaining people in the cities. I will go and save them. Well, then let's do it this way. Chapter 403. Soon, Shiro Amakusa told Wu Ming the location of the city with the remaining citizens. The servants were divided into two troops. One went to the north wall to build the wall, and the other escorted the citizens to evacuate. The army was also divided into two groups. One group followed the servants to the north wall and went to build the north wall. The other group stayed behind to escort the citizens. Later, Shiro Amakusa, Leonidas, and Fuma Kotaro led the army to the north wall to help build the defense. Okita Soki and Ba Yuzan were arranged to cover the evacuation of Babylon and Nippur, and the army was also divided into two troops. It felt like he was taking care of the girls. Cough cough. After that, Wu Ming also left Babylon. It seemed like the demonic beasts were afraid of Wu Ming and Fan Baba. Wu Ming left Fan Baba behind, and he went to the city with the remaining citizens that Shiro Amakusa said to rescue. When night came, Wu Ming returned to Fan Baba alone. Fan Baba didn't lie down to rest this time, but he was walking around like a patrol. How is it, Fan Baba? Is there anything unusual? Woo, hearing Wu Ming's question, Fan Baba shook his head and said twice, indicating that there was nothing unusual. Is that so? Wu Ming already understood why there was nothing unusual. In the towns that Wu Ming went to, there was no one left. At that time, Wu Ming checked the city, and the traces of the demonic beast's invasion were quite obvious. Wu Ming carefully searched the town, but Wu Ming didn't find any living people, not even corpses. Except for some blood on the ground, only the panicked town was left empty. It seemed that the rest of the people were dragged to the nest by the demonic beasts. With his own speed, Wu Ming quickly checked all the towns in the north. Wu Ming discovered something. No matter who it was, there were very few bloodstains. Currently, there were no magical beasts with mouths big enough to swallow a person whole. Since that was the case, there was only one possibility. Although it's inconceivable, those people should have all been transported back to their nest by the magical beasts. Wu-ming said with a grave expression. And why did the magical beasts transport those people back to their lair? Serve as food reserves? To become nourishment for Tiamat? Serving as nutrients for the production of other magic beasts? Although it was cruel to say this, but they had already entered the lair of the magical beasts, and the magical beasts could do whatever they wanted. Woo-woo, Funbaba lowered its head and rubbed against Wu-ming to comfort him. Although I'm not in a good mood, I'm more worried about one thing. Wu-ming patted Funbaba, indicating that he wasn't worried, and then continued. Say, do you think those people will be transformed into demonic beasts after they've been captured? This sentence made Funbaba a little stunned. I don't think that Tiamat, who can produce so many demonic beasts, needs nourishment, and I don't think these demonic beasts will bring people back just to store food for their own kind. Then, Wu-ming smiled casually. Of course, I'm just guessing, and it's very possible that my guess is wrong. Although he said this, Wu-ming's smile immediately became calm. And that person using Enkidu's body, she must be related to Tiamat. To be able to steal Enkidu's body without anyone noticing, it must be that person or his 72 subordinates who did it. But since they were able to entrust the Holy Grail to them, act together with Tiamat's demonic beasts, and tell me that they are both children of the same mother, there is no doubt that she must be related to Tiamat, and their relationship is not shallow, Wu-ming said with certainty, and then began to think about who the real person in Enkidu's body was. Woo-woo, looking at the frowning Wu-ming, Funbaba stepped forward and pushed the unprepared Wu-ming to the ground, and then pressed its huge head on Wu-ming's body. Wait, Funbaba, what are you doing? Being pushed down, Wu-ming was startled, and his thoughts jumped out of his thoughts. Woo-woo, Funbaba ignored Wu-ming's question, and continued to act like a spoiled child, constantly rubbing against Wu-ming. But little did he know that with the huge Funbaba rubbing against him like this, Wu-ming couldn't take it. I know, I won't think about it anymore. Get off of me first. Woo-woo. After a short period of disturbance, Wu-ming got rid of Funbaba's spoiled child. Then, it was already evening, and the sun had set. Really, don't jump on me in the future. Your head is bigger than my body. How can you just jump on me like that? Wu-ming sorted out the disturbance caused by Funbaba, and said to Funbaba somewhat helplessly. Woo-woo, Funbaba sat there obediently, like a child who admitted its mistake. Well, I'm not blaming you. Be careful next time. Seeing the listless Funbaba, Wu-ming was amused, and then quickly comforted Funbaba. Woo-woo, after being touched by its master, Funbaba showed a happy expression. For a moment, Wu-ming sat on Funbaba, and Funbaba carried Wu-ming slowly towards the north. Wu-ming looked at the endless plains in the north, as well as the mountainous fir forest in the northwest. There was no doubt that the magical beasts had come from there. Speaking of which, the fir forest seems to be your territory, Funbaba. Wu-ming suddenly remembered that Funbaba used to live in the fir forest. Woo-woo, Funbaba's huge head nodded. Its current state was like having a home that it couldn't go back to. Well, but you actually don't care, right? Wu-ming just smiled at this. Funbaba didn't care about its residents, and the fir forest was just a good forest, so Funbaba settled there. Woo-woo, Funbaba was very happy. After Funbaba had Wu-ming as its master, it was very happy to follow its master. Looking at the lights of Babylon behind him, Wu-ming asked Funbaba, "Have the vines been set up?" Woo-woo. Because Wu-ming needed to defend against the attack of the magical beasts alone, Funbaba began to set up vines underground when Wu-ming went to look for survivors during the day. Don't think that Funbaba was really just strolling. Very good. Then now we just have to wait for the magical beasts to attack. I have a hunch that the magical beasts will attack tonight. Wu-ming said seriously. Although it wanted to complain about how its master knew, Funbaba didn't ask for a rebuff. Anyway, it just followed its master. After that, until almost dawn, there was no movement on the plains. Not even a bird or a rabbit could be seen. It's coming. Chapter 404. Coming. After Wu-ming said that, Funbaba raised its head and looked ahead. The night in Mesopotamia was dark. If there was no light, it would be hard to see. Countless red dots appeared in the forest of fir trees in the distant mountainous region. Those were the shining eyes of demonic beasts at night. Of course, the degree of danger was the same. On the plain in front of Wu-ming, there were many red dots. Looking at the number, there were more demonic beasts than during the day. Roar! Accompanied by the charge and roar of the demonic beasts, the earth began to tremble. If these demonic beasts really rushed over, perhaps all the citizens of Babylon and Nippur would suffer. Did all these demonic beasts come out? Does Tiamat want to start a full-scale war now? Wu Ming said seriously. His tone was puzzled. Starting a war first was not good for either side. The human side that had not yet established the North Wall would suffer heavy losses. But Tiamat, who was in the northern mountains, would also lose the protection of the demonic beasts. The servants could form a surprise attack force and go straight to the root of the problem. With so many demonic beasts coming, coupled with the tremors on the ground, Babylon, which was currently closest to the north, must have noticed. After all, since there was an example of a demonic beast attack at night, whether it was Babylon or Nippur, they had sent more people to guard the night for fear of a sudden attack by demonic beasts. Don't worry about that, Fun Baba. Raise the vine wall. Wu Ming had no time to study those things. The most important thing now was to stop the attack of the demonic beasts. Wu Fun Baba understood and walked forward for a distance. Then its huge feet gently stomped on the ground, like an earthquake. Rumble. A green wall rose behind Fun Baba and Wu Ming. Taking a closer look, it was a wall made of vines. The vine wall was oriented from east to west. That's right, it was the same as the north wall. However, compared to the north wall, the vine wall made by Fun Baba was very weak. Because it was made in a hurry, the most it could do was to resist the attack of the magical beasts tonight. If the magical beasts continued to attack without any external interference, a hole would appear in the vine barrier when it was almost dawn. When the sky was completely bright, the vine barrier would completely collapse. Of course, if Enkidu had come, the outcome would have been different. The vine barrier might not even last for a moment. This was the reason why Wu Ming and Fun Baba were outside the vine barrier. They wanted to stop Enkidu from destroying the vine barrier and reduce the number of monsters as much as possible. Wu Ming got down from the Fun Baba and walked to the front of the Fun Baba. One man and one beast stood there. Although they were facing thousands of magical beasts, they did not panic at all. Then let's begin. Let's party all night. As he spoke, Wu Ming's hands began to move non-stop. Lines of lune runes were drawn by Wu Ming's hands. Each lune rune seemed to be able to find a matching lune rune. They began to combine and attack the magical beasts in the distance. Fun Baba was not idle either. It controlled countless vines to rush out from the ground and attack the magical beasts that were rushing towards them. Countless lune runes appeared in Wu Ming's hands. Together with the vines that kept coming out from the ground, they strangled the magical beasts that were rushing towards them. Although the magical beasts were almost in front of Wu Ming, if this was the extent of it, then the magical beasts that came out in full force tonight would be annihilated. And Wu Ming didn't think that there would only be magical beasts attacking. And now, Wu Ming once again proved how accurate his intuition was. Without a doubt, it was Enkidu. As for Wu Ming, who currently possessed extremely high divinity, once he was entangled by Enkidu, he would not be able to move for a short period of time. The enemy also saw this point and used Enkidu. At the same time, a golden chain extended from Wu Ming's body and wrapped around the silver chain. This was an action initiated by Wu Ming's Enkidu consciousness. Wu Ming did not participate. Walala! The golden chain and silver chain entangled with each other and let out ear-piercing sounds. As expected, Sir Hyunryong, the chain on your body is Enkidu. At this moment, Enkidu's voice sounded from the magical beasts. Enkidu walked out from the magical beasts. The area around Enkidu was like a forbidden zone where no magical beasts dared to approach. As expected, you're the only one who can use Enkidu. Wu Ming was relieved. There were only two Enkidu in this world. One was Gilgamesh's, but Gilgamesh's Enkidu had always been sealed in the treasury. The other was naturally Enkidu's body. As a god-made armament, Enkidu could transform into Enkidu. Therefore, only the person using Enkidu's body had Enkidu's Enkidu. Wu Ming's Enkidu naturally came from Enkidu in the parallel world. Like an ill-fated relationship, Enkidu in this world and Enkidu in the parallel world converged. The silver chain extended from Enkidu's sleeves, and the end was connected to the golden chain. Don't even think about harming Sir Wu Ming. At this moment, Enkidu heard a voice through the golden chain. Enkidu was startled. That voice was not unfamiliar to Enkidu. It was a voice that Enkidu was extremely familiar with. It was the same voice as this body's. So that's how it is. Is that the real Enkidu? Enkidu received the real Enkidu's voice through the connection between the two chains. At the same time, the golden chain transmitted some other information to Enkidu. In that instant, Enkidu saw a lot of things, heard a lot of things, and even felt a lot of things. Damn it! Enkidu was shocked and immediately put away the chain. The golden chain did nothing to stop it. Almost at the same time, the silver chain returned to Enkidu, and the golden chain returned to Wuming. Enkidu closed one of his eyes and painfully covered his other eye with one hand. Sir Wuming, as expected, you're more skilled. Be careful. Mother will personally take action. Enkidu said painfully and then disappeared among the monsters. Without a doubt, Enkidu had retreated. Just as Enkidu finished speaking, the ground began to shake even more violently than before. Chapter 405. Wuming and Funbaba couldn't care less about killing the demonic beasts that were already charging towards them, because the ground in front of them had already undergone an unprecedented change. On the boundless plain, the earth began to crack from the center, and then the entire earth was completely torn apart. Then, a huge figure appeared from the earth. The figure was more than 100 stories tall, with an incomparably huge snake tail, sharp and terrifying claws, a body and face covered in scales, and a head full of ferocious snake hair. Its huge eyes flashed with a dangerous scarlet light as it stared at Wuming and Funbaba, who were like ants in front of it. Boom! Funbaba replaced Wuming to clean up the surrounding demonic beasts a little, and Wuming, who was free, looked at this prehistoric giant beast. This familiar feeling, this divinity, it's actually Tiamat? Wuming looked at the snake hair goddess in front of him with some surprise. However, Wuming could clearly recognize that the snake hair goddess in front of him was a Greek demonic beast, Medusa, who devoured 2 of her sisters, and transformed into an Avenger demonic beast, Gorgon. A Gorgon that was given Tiamat's personality, but to be honest, it's really a good match. Wuming didn't panic in the face of danger, and instead, he smiled. But then again, Enkidu actually said, not long after Enkidu retreated, it was a little too honest, wasn't it? Funbaba, you should retreat, Wuming said to Funbaba, who was continuously killing the demonic beasts around him and working hard. Woo-woo? Funbaba naturally shook its head, and then rubbed its head against Wuming. All right, I'll take care of it. These vines still need your protection. You should know that there are countless lives behind these vines. Be a good girl, Wuming gently stroked Fanny Baba's head, persuading her with both logic and emotion. Woo! Funbaba was silent for a few seconds, and then nodded. Good child, so obedient, Wuming smiled gently at Funbaba. Then, Funbaba released one last attack to repel the surrounding demonic beasts. Then, Funbaba left this place through the vines and went to the interior of the vine barrier. Okay, now I'm the only one left. Wuming looked at the giant demonic beast Gorgon. However, Gorgon didn't answer Wuming's question, either because it didn't know how to speak or because it didn't want to. Instead, it directly launched an attack. The countless snake heads on Gorgon's hair opened their mouths and gathered magic. Then, countless snake heads shot out heat rays, burying the place where Wuming was, including the demonic beasts. Rumble! A powerful explosion occurred. The dust and flames of the explosion covered Wuming's figure, and Gorgon stopped moving. Really? What a warm greeting, fake Tiamat. Wuming's voice came from the smoke. A huge white dragon claw came out of the smoke, like a dragon out of the clouds, and stretched towards Gorgon at an extremely fast speed. Gorgon was shocked and immediately controlled the snake hair to intercept it. Hiss hiss hiss. As if its target was the snake hair from the beginning, the dragon claw grabbed the snake hair and tore it off. Gorgon let out a scream that didn't belong to a human. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Are you satisfied with this greeting gift of mine? A calm voice came. A huge dragon emerged from the smoke caused by the explosion as if it had come out of a small space-time tunnel. The pure white dragon god had shining dragon scales, holy dragon horns, and white dragon wings that were twice the size of its body. Its holy dragon claws were still holding on to the struggling broken snake hair. Then, a white flame burned the snake hair, completely incinerating it. Gorgon spoke. Damn Hyunryong! Gorgon's hoarse voice came out of his throat like a broken bellows. As long as I'm here, don't even think about going back alive today, fake Tiamat. Just like that, the huge snake hair monster and the sacred dragon of protection started a confrontation in the plains in front of Babylon, a city in the north of Mesopotamia. The battle between mother and son in Mesopotamia had begun for the second time. Uruk City, Divine Tower. Because Mesopotamia was mainly plains, Gorgon, who was more than a few hundred stories tall, and Gorgon, who was only as tall as Wuming, appeared near Babylon. They were seen by the entire Uruk City, which wasn't far from Babylon. Tiamat. Gorgon. Gilgamesh looked at Tiamat, and fell into deep thought. King Gilgamesh, king. Then, Siduri's voice came from the stairs of the Divine Tower. Siduri rushed to the highest floor of the Divine Tower where Gilgamesh was in a slight panic. King Lord Hyunryong he. Humph. Idiot, of course this king saw it, Gilgamesh said disdainfully. Since Gilgamesh saw it, the Uruk citizens naturally saw it as well. King, the citizens are very uneasy. Some of them have already lost their minds. Siduri calmed down and said. The citizens were uneasy because of the confrontation between Tiamat, who was the mother goddess, and Hyunryong, who was the direct descendant of Tiamat. The existence of the mother and son confronted each other. This rebellious battle of gods caused everyone's worldview to collapse slightly. Moreover, Tiamat's deterrence toward the ordinary people made the citizens even more fearful. That's why this king said that humans are foolish beyond compare. The battle of the gods is not something that humans can stop. They can only witness it and pray for it. Hyunryong is protecting this king's citizens. The foolish citizens should pray for Hyunryong and pray for Hyunryong's victory. Gilgamesh was even more disdainful now. After speaking to Siduri, Gilgamesh turned around and looked at Gorgon and Hyunryong. He did not say anything else. Siduri did not ask any more questions. She crossed her arms and began praying to Wuming. Lord Hyunryong, you must win. Shiro Amakusa, Fuma Kotaro, and Leonidas were trying their best to rush to Babylon. It would not be long before Babylon, which was within the range of the two great gods' attacks, would be affected. They had to evacuate the population as soon as possible. Is that Tiamat? What a terrifying avenger. Shiro Amakusa did not stop walking as he spoke seriously. Lord Hyunryong's body is also quite shocking. He's almost on par with Tiamat's body. It's truly astonishing. Leonidas praised from the side. Only Fuma Kotaro remained silent. However, his increased speed showed his respect for the two great gods. Let's speed up. Otherwise, the remaining citizens of Babylon will be finished. With that, the three of them increased their speed again. At this moment, Wuming and Tiamat began the second round of confrontation after the first battle. Chapter 406. In order to protect the vine barrier behind him and the city of Babylon, Wuming blocked all of Gorgon's attacks during the transformation process. Then, Wuming completely revealed his true body. Wuming's body shouldn't be comparable to Gorgon's, but Wuming's magic power could not withstand Wuming's growth. The so-called dragon form was a noble artifact, but it was also a rider rank. Wuming's body could naturally catalyze it. Wuming catalyzed his dragon body to a size that, although not as large as Gorgon's, was enough to contend with him. Although it could accelerate the growth of his body, it was almost at its limit. If he continued to catalyze his body, his rider rank spirit base would shatter. Therefore, Wuming chose to stop growing his body. Wuming knew that with his and Gorgon's figures, if they were to fight here, Babylon behind Wuming would definitely be affected. The north wall not far from Babylon was likely to collapse. I have to leave this place and move the battlefield to an uninhabited area in the north. Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and condensed his dragon breath. Hiss! Gorgon's torn snake head had regenerated. Countless snake heads opened their mouths like Wuming, condensing heat rays in their mouths. Accompanied by the dragon's roar, Wuming's dragon breath was condensed and sprayed towards Gorgon. Hiss! Countless snake heads were not to be outdone. They hissed and shot out rays from their mouths to meet Wuming's dragon breath. Hiss! The pure white dragon breath and the purple-black heat ray fought against each other, making a sizzling sound. There was neither an explosion nor any other reaction. It was as if the two forces were balanced. However, a mere monster was no match for a holy dragon. The holy dragon breath gradually suppressed the heat ray and pressed towards Gorgon. Damn it! Gorgon once again made a hoarse sound like an old bellows. Then, the dragon breath hit Gorgon and knocked him to the ground. Boom! His snake hair billowed as Gorgon's huge body lay on the ground, causing another earthquake. Now! Wooming fiercely flapped his wings and flew into the sky with a large amount of gravel on the ground. After circling in the sky for a while, Wooming swooped down and grabbed Gorgon with his claws. It had to be said that a huge body brought great strength and endurance, but in terms of agility, it was a big disadvantage. At this moment, Gorgon was like this. Gorgon was knocked to the ground by Wooming's powerful dragon breath, but after all, Gorgon's endurance was super high. Because of the effect of the skill transformation magic, Gorgon's endurance had reached A++ level. Pure dragon breath could not harm Gorgon, so Wooming changed the dragon breath into an impact attack aimed at Gorgon's body and successfully knocked him to the ground. Although he had the same agility as Wooming, if Wooming's speed increased, Gorgon would not be able to react in time. The mysterious Loon rune wrapped around Wooming's huge dragon body. At this moment, Wooming's agility had surpassed rank A. Wooming successfully grabbed Gorgon before Gorgon could get up. However, Wooming did not want to harm him. Bang! Wooming's two huge dragon claws grabbed Gorgon's two hands. The Loon rune appeared again, and the strength of rank B instantly surpassed Gorgon. Wooming flew up with Gorgon. That's right, Wooming wanted to change the battlefield. However, in the face of a huge existence like Gorgon, it was not convenient to divert its attention. Therefore, Wooming chose to change the battlefield. He directly used his advantage as a flying dragon to grab Gorgon and fly. It had to be said that this was a bold and stupid method. How stupid! Gilgamesh looked at Wooming flying north and Wooming carrying Gorgon as he frowned and scolded. Not to mention whether Gorgon would attack Wooming in the air. Even if he carried Gorgon that weighed more than 10,000 pounds, Wooming's spirit base would not be able to handle it. No matter which one it was, the final battle after reaching the destination would be disadvantageous to Wooming. Lord Hyunryong. Siduri closed her eyes, no longer looking at the disappearing dragon figure, and silently prayed. It had to be said that Gilgamesh was right. In the sky, Wooming, who was flying north, was already being attacked by Gorgon. Although Gorgon's hands were grabbed by Wooming's dragon claws, Gorgon did not rely on its hands to attack. Gorgon glared angrily as countless snake hair tore at Wooming's body. Traces of blood flowed from Wooming's body. The blood dripped onto the ground, leaving a special mark. After all, this was Hyunryong's body, not the body of the origin dragon. Therefore, Gorgon with Tiamat's body could cause damage to Wooming. At this moment, if one looked carefully, one could see that there was a trace of electricity passing through Wooming's body, and a trace of gray appeared on the dragon's scales. That was the demon eye, a gemstone-grade demon eye of petrification that could petrify all enemies. After all, it was Medusa's cursed growth state, so it was normal for it to have the legendary Medusa's demon eye of petrification. Although Gorgon had used the magic eye on Wooming from the beginning, Wooming, who had a plus holy aura and A+ magic power ability, was extremely resistant to the magic eye of petrification, so the magic eye of petrification did not have much effect. Got to say, the demon eye of petrification was really a killer move. For example, Anna dealt with Demudo, and the demon eye of petrification had a fatal effect. However, it was somewhat useless to use it on Wooming. In this position, it's about time. Wooming ignored the damage on his body. After seeing that they were far enough away, Wooming let go of Gorgon's dragon claws. At the same time, Wooming widened his enormous dragon mouth, instantly condensed dragon breath, and sprayed it at the descending Gorgon. Boom! The dragon's breath hit Gorgon, who had fallen to the ground like a huge meteorite. There was a huge roar on the ground, causing a large amount of smoke and dust. The smoke was in the shape of a mushroom cloud, spreading and covering Gorgon's body. Wooming flew in the sky, relying on his strong durability and Loon runes to recover himself. He looked at the mushroom cloud below sternly. And just as Wooming looked down solemnly, laser-like rays shot out crazily from the mushroom cloud at an extremely high frequency. Wooming waved his body to dodge. Because of the sudden arrival, one of the rays brushed past Wooming's wings. Sizzle! Wooming's wings emitted a sound as if they were being burned, producing carbonization and black smoke. It's different from the previous attack. Wooming frowned. Then, the laser beam stopped, accompanied by a hurricane. Gorgon pushed away the smoke and stared at Wu Ming with scarlet eyes. As expected, you are an unstable factor that must be eliminated. Chapter 407. Sure enough, you are an unstable factor that must be eliminated. Gorgon spoke again, but this time her voice was not as hoarse as before, like a broken bellows, but a normal female voice. Wu Ming flapped his wings, landed on the ground from the sky, and looked at Gorgon quietly. Neither of them attacked again. In Wu Ming's view, since the other party spoke, then she must have something to say. Then are you going to destroy me? Just because you're a fake Tiamat? Or you see that you can't beat me, so you want to rope me in? Wu Ming mocked back disdainfully. It had to be said, if Tiamat was the real body, Wu Ming really couldn't beat her in his current state. However, if it was just a goddess Gorgon who had Tiamat's personality, Wu Ming wasn't afraid. So far, Gorgon had only shown one ability of Tiamat's personality, and that was 100 Beasts Mother Fetus, an ability that was used to produce magical beasts. If that was really the case, Wu Ming could solve the magical beast crisis now. Back to the main topic, Gorgon saw Wu Ming land and continued to speak. I don't want to be obsessed with Tiamat's identity, but since I was given Tiamat's divinity, then I have to replace her and do something that she couldn't do. Gorgon's snake hair swayed, unusually calm. Destroying the children that abandoned her, this was what Gorgon said she had to do. Don't tell me you don't have thoughts of revenge. Wu Ming continued. Through taking revenge on humans to express your anger of being betrayed and treated as a magical beast, isn't this the main reason why you came as an avenger, Goddess Gorgon? Wu Ming mocked as if he saw through Gorgon. At first, the problem of Tiamat gave Wu Ming endless trouble, and Wu Ming kept thinking about this problem. It wasn't until Gorgon appeared that Wu Ming understood. Tiamat was indeed awakened, but for some reason, Tiamat refused to come to the modern world, and then Gorgon inherited Tiamat's divinity and was summoned as Tiamat. After all, although Tiamat was abandoned and exiled by her children, she was willing to do so. Therefore, Wu Ming could understand why Tiamat refused to appear in the modern world. Wu Ming wouldn't belittle this great maternal love, but Gorgon, who was given Tiamat's divinity as a fake Tiamat, made Wu Ming extremely disgusted. To be honest, Gorgon, I really hate you. I hate that you pretend to be Mother Tiamat. However, Wu Ming's words made Gorgon angry. Is that so? I originally wanted to cooperate with you, but it seems impossible. This was probably the reason why Gorgon spoke in a normal way in this uninhabited place. It was impossible from the beginning. I am Hyunryong, the Uruk Hyunryong who protects the world. Facing you who wants to destroy the human race, we can only fight. Wu Ming shook his head. However, I don't need your permission to cooperate with me. Gorgon smiled terrifyingly. Boom! The ground was instantly torn apart, and huge black pythons appeared from the ground under Wu Ming's feet without warning, instantly entangling Wu Ming. What? Wu Ming looked at these huge black pythons entangling him with some surprise. However, Wu Ming wasn't surprised by the attack, but by the power contained in these black pythons. Those were the power of the same origin as Wu Ming. The black snakes formed from origin power. So that's how it is. If you are Tiamat, you can indeed use this power. Wu Ming said with relief. Wu Ming once had a dream where he heard Tiamat singing in a dark space where it was difficult to move. After dreaming of Tiamat, Wu Ming had been worried about the black origin soil in that space. Wu Ming didn't think that the black origin soil had nothing to do with Tiamat. And now, Wu Ming was certain that Tiamat could use the black origin soil, and it wasn't strange that Gorgon, who had Tiamat's personality, could use the black origin soil. This is bad. Although Wu Ming said it was bad, his tone didn't sound bad at all. Be assimilated by the black soil and become my dependents. Gorgon laughed wildly. Tiamat's power, the Sea of Life. As long as someone was eroded by the black soil from the Sea of Life and dragged into the Sea of Life, they would definitely be assimilated by Tiamat and become a part of her. And these black snakes were an incomplete use of the Sea of Life. With Wu Ming's current ability, once he was dragged into the Sea of Life, his body's spirit base would definitely be assimilated, and he would become Tiamat's son again, the god closest to Tiamat. After all, with the black soil infused with the power of the origin, it could be said that there was nothing it couldn't control. However, if he wanted the power of the other party's origin, he had to use the power of the origin. And it just so happened that Wu Ming had the power of the origin. Boom! The power of the origin in Wu Ming's body erupted, instantly breaking through the black snake's bindings and scattering them. Then, Wu Ming immediately flapped his wings and flew into the sky. It had to be said that Gorgon couldn't fly, which was one of Wu Ming's great advantages. To be able to break through the sea of life's bindings, as expected of Hyunryong. Gorgon was slightly surprised. After all, in the knowledge he had been given, this was the first time an existence had been able to break free from the sea of life despite being bound. However, since you chose to break free from the bindings, it means that the sea of life still has an effect on you. In that case, we just need to increase the amount. As Gorgon spoke, he raised his hands, and his snake hair danced. Giant black snakes appeared from the ground, looking at Wu Ming in the sky. This is rather similar to Athena. Wu Ming looked at Gorgon controlling the black snakes and thought of Athena in the God-Slayer world. Athena used her own dark energy to form black snakes to attack. Athena! Gorgon's face was filled with anger. After all, according to the legends, Medusa was cursed by Athena, and then turned into a demon, devouring her two sisters and becoming Gorgon. Gorgon was naturally furious at Athena. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Countless black snakes rushed toward Wu Ming in the sky, and Gorgon released divine heat rays on the ground. Wu Ming was facing a formidable enemy. He tried his best to dodge the heat rays and the black snakes, and from time to time, he used dragon breath to attack the black snakes and Gorgon. The dragon breath could destroy these black snakes, but every time Wu Ming attacked Gorgon, there would always be black snakes appearing to help Gorgon block Wu Ming's attacks. Seeing this, Wu Ming's heart sank. This is really bad. Chapter 408. Wu Ming, who had transformed into a Hyunryong dragon, was unprecedentedly powerful in terms of physical strength and magic. After all, the Uruk Hyunryong was Gilgamesh's teacher. However, after using the Sea of Life, Wu Ming would not choose to fight Gorgon in close combat. After all, there were too many black snakes, and it seemed like there was no limit. These black snakes were not enough to corrode Wu Ming, but if there were too many of them, Wu Ming would not be able to move and would be at the mercy of others. It was like the relationship between water and fire. The black snakes were fire, and Wu Ming was water. Fire could not envelop water, so the black snakes could not bind Wu Ming. However, if there was enough fire, the water would be evaporated, leaving nothing behind. In simple terms, if Wu Ming was really injected into the Sea of Life, then he would definitely be forced to leave. However, Wu Ming's spirit base would be recorded by the Sea of Life, and more Hyunryong would be produced. That would be terrible. Therefore, Wu Ming could only choose to capture the leader and kill Gorgon first. Then he would need to attack from afar. However, Wu Ming's long-range attacks were useless. Whether it was his own dragon breath or the loon's magic attacks, they would all be blocked by the black snakes. Gorgon also knew that Wu Ming would choose to attack him. Gorgon would not let Wu Ming's plan succeed. There were more than 10 black snakes around him, and once they were reduced, they would immediately replace them. Then there was only one way left. Kill all the black snakes around Gorgon, then kill Gorgon and force him to leave. Wu Ming's huge eyes emitted a cold gaze. Wu Ming had considered killing both the black serpent and Gorgon, but killing Gorgon with the black serpent as a shield would be difficult. Gorgon's durability was A++. To put it simply, it wasn't easy to die. But now, it was surrounded by black snakes that were both spears and shields. The difficulty was simply too great. However, Wu Ming had an idea. I'm going Gorgon. Wu Ming roared as he charged at Gorgon. Hiss! Countless black snakes rushed towards Wu Ming from all directions, including countless heat rays that could cause true damage to Wu Ming. The attacking black snakes had to be destroyed. After all, those things were quite difficult to deal with. As for the heat rays, he would try his best to dodge as many as possible. If he couldn't dodge them, he could only defend against them, even though he couldn't defend against them. Wu Ming kept dodging one heat ray after another, destroying one black snake after another. His body was getting smaller and smaller. Of course, this was Wu Ming's intention. After all, moving forward with so many attacks, it was still advantageous to be small. However, Wu Ming didn't dare to change back to his human form. Not only would all his ability points drop by 1 level, but without the protection of the dragon scales, Wuming's defense would also be greatly weakened. Although Wuming had almost given up on defending. When he was very close to Gorgon, Wuming's body had shrunk to his initial size. Compared to Gorgon, he was almost a quarter of Gorgon's height. "You're giving up. Are you prepared to walk into a trap, Hyunryong?" Gorgon said mockingly. Although that was what he said, Gorgon didn't think that Hyunryong would commit suicide. He must have some plan. Gorgon instantly controlled countless black snakes to surround Wuming and rush towards him. "That's good. What a coincidence. I said I was going to commit suicide." Wuming smiled. Then, the Lune runes on his body lit up. That was the original 18th Lune. Dug Odin. How dare you! In an instant, with the release of the noble phantasm real name, and Gorgon's surprised voice, Gorgon and Wuming's eyes fell into a white light. Rumble! In the distance, Uruk. Gilgamesh looked at a 7-colored energy pillar that rose into the sky and smiled. What a pleasant battle. This time, Gorgon lost. In front of Babylon, the vine barrier. Woo-woo! Funbaba looked at the 7-colored light pillar worriedly. Funbaba, who had a connection with his master, could sense that his master was in a bad situation. Babylon City. Nippur City. A few servants who were nervously moving the crowd between the two cities also saw the 7-colored light pillar and were stunned. Not only that, but the citizens who wanted to take advantage of the time when Wuming took Gorgon away were also stunned. They stared blankly at the scene. As expected of Hyunryong Sama, he can actually do this. Shiro Amakusa praised. In the 7-colored light pillar, a huge source of power was the main body. The power of fire and frost complemented each other. The heavy earth and the light wind complemented each other. It was rare that the active life and the silent death did not corrode each other. This was the real great god's seal. It gathered all the power of the Lune runes that Odin sacrificed one of his eyes. It was reproduced in Mesopotamia by Hyunryong, who replaced the Uruk. As for the problem of the noble phantasm, because Dug Odin was a magic spell on the level of a noble phantasm, there was no reason why Silent Moon, who could use all the runes of Rune, would not be able to use it. After all, Wuming was not a servant that could be judged by the normal servant rules. Oh! Gorgon's scream came from the light pillar. After a while, the 7-colored light pillar disappeared. The smoke produced by the great god seal almost covered the entire northern battlefield, making it impossible to see the battlefield clearly. The great god seal, which contained the source of power, destroyed all the black snakes, including the black snakes beside Gorgon. Gorgon was naturally not left behind. He was burned by the great god seal. The powerful great god seal had an effect on Gorgon. At this moment, Gorgon's snake hair was destroyed. His scales were falling off. There was not a single part of his body that was intact. Blood was spurting out. Gorgon's huge snake tail was lying on the ground powerlessly. He was also weakly supporting himself on the ground with his hands. Gorgon, who used the Sea of Life's authority, also had the aura of the black mud in his body. Wuming's source of power that restrained each other was contained in the great god seal. There was no doubt that Gorgon's foundation was damaged. If it wasn't for the fact that it had a durability of a ++, and that Gorgon was at the edge of the attack of the Dug Odin, Gorgon would have disappeared in the colorful light just now. That guy, is he crazy? Gorgon panted slightly and sighed. The reason why Gorgon said that was because of the power of this move. Yes, Gorgon's foundation was damaged and he was about to die. However, what would happen to Wuming, who had imprinted the origin of the 18 Lune on his body and detonated it? Without a doubt, the answer would be to leave. This was also something that Gorgon did not expect. Wuming would risk the consequences of leaving to detonate himself and die together with him. Uruk Hyunryong, I admit that you won this time. Gorgon closed his eyes and said lightly. However, your plan did not succeed. Even if you hurt me like this, give me a few months and I will be able to recover. Without the Uruk, you can only wait to die. Gorgon suddenly opened his eyes. A scarlet light flashed. I'm sorry, I haven't left yet. A voice came from the surrounding smoke. Then, a golden chain wrapped around Gorgon's neck and pulled him to the ground. Chapter 409. How is this possible? How did you survive that level of explosion? Gorgon lay weakly on the ground. His tone was abnormally terrified. After all, even without the power of origin, the Oct du Godin that had been planned for a long time was enough to blast Gorgon half to death. And how could Wuming be fine in the center of such an explosion? You're right, I couldn't have survived the explosion just now. Wuming said lightly, then walked out of the smoke and dust to Gorgon. The moment Gorgon saw Wuming, he was relieved. Wuming had already returned to his human form from his dragon form, and seemed to be fine. However, that was only possible if one ignored Wuming's transparent body and the Holy Grail that was exposed in his heart. Caught the power of the Holy Grail and barely survived. Gorgon grabbed the golden chains that bound him. At this moment, Gorgon looked extremely weak, and after a few movements, he gave up. Wuming, who should have left, didn't. That was because he caught the power of the Holy Grail and forced himself to stay here. But looking at Wuming's appearance, he probably wouldn't even last a minute before leaving. A minute was very short, so short that Gorgon couldn't hold on, but a minute was also very long, so long that Wuming could kill the weak Gorgon in a minute. The current Gorgon was at the end of the light crossbow. No, perhaps not even at the end of the light crossbow. Even if Wuming was about to disappear, Wuming's current state could be said to be the final radiance of the setting sun. It should be known that the final radiance of the setting sun was everyone's strongest moment. In this short period of less than a minute, it was enough for Wuming to kill Gorgon. As expected, this is the end of my road. Gorgon gave up struggling. Like a curse, being suppressed by heroes, this was the unchanging end of the path for demons. You don't have to be like this, Gorgon. Wuming looked at Gorgon and shook his head. There's no need for you to play the role of Tiamat. You're Gorgon, no one else. How can you win if you run away and deny yourself? I hate people like you who run away. Wuming explained why he hated Gorgon so much. Is that so? I see. Gorgon finally understood before he died. Wuming looked at his body. It would disappear in a few seconds. I don't have much time left. Since you've already understood, then go in peace. After Wuming finished speaking, he raised his left hand that was not holding the chain. His left hand instantly transformed, and an incomparably huge dragon claw appeared. This was the effect of Wuming's noble phantasm. The claw that was condensed with magic power clawed at Gorgon's chest, where the spirit core was located. However, just like in dramas, as long as the opponent was given an explanation before he died, he would definitely lose. Just as Wuming's huge dragon claw was about to pierce Gorgon's heart, the silver chain instantly wrapped around Wuming's dragon claw and Wuming's body. Mother! Are you all right? Enkidu suddenly appeared and shouted nervously. You're in luck, Gorgon. Wuming's body began to disappear from his feet. The golden heavenly lock that was binding Gorgon also turned into light spots and disappeared. Ah, that's right. I have an underling who cares about my mother. Gorgon was no longer obsessed with Tiamat's identity. Gorgon slowly got up and looked indifferently at Wuming, who was about to disappear. Enkidu did not know why, but he also looked at Wuming. Through his eyes, Wuming could see that he did not have the heart to do so. You've won this battle. In the following days, I won't come out of my temple in the north until I fully recover. Wuming pursed his lips helplessly. Gorgon would not be able to recover from the damage caused by this battle without a few months. If she dared to show up, she would be attacked by the other servants. If Gorgon was seriously injured, the servants summoned by Gilgamesh would be able to kill her. I will only send out monsters. I will not appear in person. Consider it your reward for winning. After all, Gorgon had her dignity. She would restrain herself if she lost. However, the one who died was not her, but the winner, Wuming. Therefore, Gorgon would not give up on invading the Uruk. As you wish, Wuming said indifferently. After Wuming finished, Gorgon left toward the north, leaving Wuming's head and Enkidu's head behind. Looking at Enkidu, who did not leave, Wuming opened his mouth. Although I don't know who you are, I can see that you are not a bad person. It's just that your standpoint is different. Wuming smiled at Enkidu. Enkidu was somewhat flustered and blushed. If it's possible, I hope that you can take care of this Holy Grail. Wuming finished speaking and completely disappeared. Clang! The Holy Grail that was located at Wuming's heart fell to the ground. Enkidu thought for a moment, then walked to the place where Wuming disappeared, picked up the Holy Grail, and left. The city of Babylon and the city of Nippur were in the midst of population transfer overnight. Because of the commotion caused by Wu Ming and Tiamat, people were not in the mood to sleep. Coupled with the monster crisis, people were constantly moving people under the arrangement of the servants. Because the monster horde and Gorgon attacked in the middle of the night, it was almost a few hours before the battle between Wu Ming and Gorgon ended. Shiro Amakusa stood on a tall building in the city of Babylon, which had almost completed its population migration, and looked at the battlefield where Wu Ming and Gorgon had settled down in the distance, and did not speak for a long time. Did Hyunryong win? Leonidas appeared behind Shiro Amakusa and asked Shiro Amakusa. Shiro Amakusa nodded and then shook his head. Hyunryong won, but he also left. Gorgon lost, but he is still alive. This was what Fuma Kotaro said after collecting information. In fact, in the current situation, Wu Ming undoubtedly lost. Now, almost all the servants who saw Gorgon's real body knew that it was not Tiamat who gave birth to the monster, but Gorgon who got Tiamat's personality. Let's go, the north wall is almost finished. It's time to retreat. Then the three of them left Babylon. Nippur was the same. After Okita Soki and Ba Guzan finished guiding the residents of Nippur, they looked into the distance. Hyunryong, Sama failed. Okita Soki said in a low voice. However, knowing that Tiamat is actually Gorgon is quite important. Hyunryong, Sama's sacrifice was not in vain. Ba Guzan said firmly. Let's go, it's time to return to the north wall. Uruk, Tower of God. Siduri stood unnaturally beside Gilgamesh, assisting Gilgamesh in handling government affairs. It's almost time to recover, Siduri. Gilgamesh suddenly said. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, King Gilgamesh. Siduri said apologetically. Hyunryong is not dead. It's just a clone that died. Gorgon was seriously injured. Now we have the advantage, so cheer up. Gilgamesh reprimanded. Yes, King Gilgamesh. It's just that I don't know where the Holy Grail is. I have to find it as soon as possible. Gilgamesh said to himself. Then the sun rose. A new morning sun. Gilgamesh did not know what he was referring to. Looking at the rising sun, Siduri's heart was also active. Hyunryong had done a lot for Mesopotamia, and the rest was left to them. Inside the root, the huge root dragon opened its eyes. Chapter 4:10. Within the root, Wu Ming opened his eyes. I forgot about the variable using Enkidu's body. The Heaven Lock is very effective against me. After all, Wu Ming's rider-class clone had extremely high divinity. Even if he had used brute force to break free, Wu Ming's spirit base would have been destroyed. I'm sorry, Lord Wu Ming, I didn't help. Enkidu's voice sounded. Wu Ming looked at the chain on his arm. Of course not, little Enkidu. Didn't you win effortlessly against the Quetzalcoatl? As for the end, you were focused on restraining Gorgon, so it's understandable that you didn't notice the other Heaven Lock coming. After all, an injured beast was the scariest. It was hard to guarantee that Gorgon wouldn't recover before death. That was why Enkidu had used all his strength to restrain Gorgon, and didn't use another chain to deal with the other Heaven Lock. Also, we've done enough. Let's leave the rest to Gil and the others. Don't forget that Tachika and the others are also working hard. Don't worry too much. Wu Ming laughed like an optimist. Looking at Wu Ming like this, Enkidu felt a little helpless, but he didn't say anything. As long as you're happy, Lord Wu Ming. Enkidu's tone was light. As long as Lord Wu Ming didn't feel like he was a burden, it was fine. At this moment, Wu Ming, who was inside the root, sensed something outside. Did those guys become active because of the influence I caused in Mesopotamia? Wu Ming opened a lens in front of him, and countless black substances rushed over. Naturally, it was the root black soil that was attacking from outside. But if they only rely on numbers, they're like moths to a flame. How strong was Wu Ming now? Before coming to the origin, Wu Ming was no longer afraid of the origin black soil. Now, Wu Ming had stayed in the origin for quite some time. For Wu Ming, who could absorb the power of origins, to strengthen himself, being inside a great origin was the same as entering a device that could endlessly increase his strength. Wu Ming sat on the platform at the center of the great source and closed his eyes. In an instant, a blinding white light shot out from Wu Ming's body, penetrating the origin as if it was nothing. The white light penetrated the origin and went outside. Like the exterior of the universe's great origin, countless pieces of black mud surged forward one after another, like the surface of an ocean in the midst of a storm. However, when the pure white light came into contact with the source of the black mud was like a flame that had come into contact with water and was instantly extinguished. Countless black origin mud were constantly swallowed and destroyed by the pure white light. However, the black origin mud seemed to know no fear and continued to surge forward. It didn't take long for the surging black mud outside the great origin to be completely destroyed. The space outside the great origin regained its mystery and tranquility like the universe. I have to say, if the black origin mud had attacked me while my consciousness was shifting to the servant's clone, the defensive device I set up would have been useless. Then, Wu Ming looked at the back of his dragon claw, which had a black dragon-shaped imprint on it. Crackle crackle. A bolt of lightning streaked across the back of Wu Ming's dragon claw and erased the black dragon-shaped imprint. Wu Ming had already memorized the world coordinates of the singularity, so he no longer needed the black imprint. The black dragon-shaped imprint was also responsible for the black origin mud's attack, which was why Wu Ming chose to dispel it. In that case, Collis, stay behind and help me manage these defensive tactics, in case those things attack me again while I'm asleep. If a large amount of black origin mud attacked here while Wu Ming's consciousness was in the servant's clone, it would be really troublesome. If he chose to stay behind to solve the problem, it was very likely that the great origin would be attacked, and Wu Ming's foundation would be affected. After all, Wu Ming still needed the power of the great origin to grow. If Wu Ming decisively dispelled the servant's clone, the great origin would be saved, but the problem in the servant's world would not be solved, which would be terrible. In other words, if Tachika Fujiwara was in a life-threatening situation, only Wu Ming could save her. What should he do if the great origin was attacked by the black origin mud? Wu Ming couldn't make the decision to abandon Tachika Fujiwara, but he had to ensure that the great origin was absolutely safe, which made him very conflicted. Because of that, if Collis stayed behind and controlled the defensive tactics, Wu Ming would be able to safely carry out his tasks in another world. Understood, Master. Collis indifferently replied. Collis naturally understood this principle, so she immediately agreed. Collis flew down from Wu Ming's head, turned into a machine that acted like a central device, and landed inside the great origin, on the platform that Wu Ming was lying on. The platform was very large, and Wu Ming's shrunken body didn't take up much space. I will help Master guard the house. A screen appeared on the device, displaying what looked like an electrocardiogram. As Collis spoke, the electrocardiogram began to jump. Even if she didn't understand, she had to accept it. Solving problems for her master was her duty as the master's magic attire. Well then, Enkidu will continue to follow me this time. Wu Ming then said to the chain on his dragon arm. Yes. Enkidu said excitedly. Collis spat out in displeasure. After a while, the shadow of a dragon left the great origin. But don't misunderstand, that wasn't Wu Ming's main body. Wu Ming's main body was sleeping inside the great origin. The shadow of the dragon that flew out of the great origin was a true clone created by Wu Ming. After all, the body of a servant was still a bit weak. It would be fine if it was a powerful class, but Wu Ming always became a class that was disadvantageous to him for various reasons. Therefore, Wu Ming created a true clone of himself. Using the power of the great origin, relying on Wu Ming's wisdom, and Wu Ming's own body as the blueprint, he created the Origin Dragon mini-machine. Just like the male version of the Gilgamesh doll made by Wu Ming, he put his consciousness into it and transferred his consciousness into it. Although this Origin Dragon mini-machine was a puppet, it was closer to the servant's spiritual base. After all, it was a product of the Great Origin. How could it be like an ordinary puppet? That was why Wu Ming completely put his consciousness into it. This Origin Dragon mini-machine had all the abilities of Wu Ming's main body. However, whether it was the Sword of Salvation, the 12 incarnations, or the Origin Dragon's characteristics, this body could use them all. However, no matter what ability it was, its power was reduced a lot, but it was still better than a simple servant's body. Wu Ming was going to use this body to go to the singularity where Tachika and the others were now and help them break through all the singularities as soon as possible. After all, this was a disaster that endangered Ilya world, and it was better to solve it as soon as possible. Wu Ming came to the long-lost space-time tunnel, and controlled his body to wander inside. Just as Wu-Ming was about to enter the singularity where Tachika was, Wu-Ming heard a voice. God-sama, if there is a God-sama among humans, why didn't he show up to save us? This sentence contained many emotions: hatred, hope, numbness. Wu-Ming was attracted by these emotions, stopped moving, and thought, is this the strong longing of other worlds received by my body? Wu-Ming thought for a while, then gave up entering Tachika's world, and turned to the place where the voice came from. Interesting. Hating the gods yet hoping for the gods? What kind of world is this? Let me take a look. Wu-Ming opened the space-time portal of that world and went in. Chapter 4:11. The sky was dark and gloomy. Endless thick fog and dark clouds covered the sky, and not a single ray of sunlight shone on the earth. The land was desolate. It was either cracked land or land full of strange plants. In short, it was a tragic sight that was unbearable to look at. It was desolate everywhere. Disgusting. This was the sigh of the white dragon that had just come out of the space-time tunnel. Wu-Ming could feel that everywhere was filled with dead silence. The land had lost its vitality, the sea had dried up, the sky was covered, and the air was filled with an unpleasant smell. All of this was nauseating. Wu-Ming flew in the sky, looking at the world that looked like the end of the world, and fell into deep thought. Wu-Ming did not need to visually estimate. Through the attributes of the atmosphere and the current state of the earth, Wu-Ming could tell that the entire world was probably covered in dark clouds and smoke. No wonder there was such a sad sigh. It would be strange not to be sad living in such a world. Wu-Ming shook his head. I'm afraid it's an unknown world. I'd better use some concealment tactics on myself first. With these thoughts, Wu-Ming mobilized magic power, and then he found that there was no magic power in this world, but there was another kind of energy. Not magic power? This is really interesting. Wu-Ming laughed. The worlds that Wu-Ming had been to before were all worlds with magic power, but this world did not have magic power, but another special power, which attracted Wu-Ming's attention. However, this is not difficult for me. Several tactics appeared and covered Wu-Ming's body. The tactic that blocked detection was successfully used by Wu-Ming. Then, Wu-Ming looked around, found a place to land, and flew over. Boom! In a natural cave, a ball of white flame burst out from inside. Plop! A huge corpse that looked like a multi-legged centipede fell to the ground, then turned into dust and collapsed. Really, why is there danger everywhere? Is there no safe place in this world? Wu-Ming's voice was heard. Wu-Ming extinguished the flame on his hand and walked into the cave. At this moment, Wu-Ming was wearing a black hooded cloak. After entering the cave, Wu-Ming took off the hood and then looked around the cave. I have to say, this giant centipede is really neat. I was thinking if it was like that tentacle-like thing's place was full of mucus, or if it was like that bear-like thing's cave was full of feces and skeletons, then I'd have to change places again. Wu-Ming said with some relief. Then, Wu-Ming sat down in the cave. As for why Wu-Ming came back here, it had to start from the moment he landed. After Wu-Ming landed, he recovered his human form. After all, it was a weakened version of the power of the root, so it was natural that he could turn into a human. Then, Wu-Ming began to look for a place to rest. After a few twists and turns, he finally found a decent place. During this process, Wu-Ming discovered that there were things that Wu-Ming didn't know about almost everywhere on the ground. Poisonous flowers, black dust that could corrode flesh, an atmosphere that made it difficult for living creatures to survive, and various monsters. At the thought of those things, Wu-Ming had a headache. If humans can survive here, we'll be thankful to the heavens and earth. As for why Wu-Ming could use magic in this world without magic. After all, Wu-Ming was a dragon of the root, a noble and mysterious existence born from the root. And all worlds were born from the root, so it wasn't hard to understand why Wu-Ming could use the energy of other worlds. This power is quite interesting. As he said that, Wu-Ming extended a finger. Specks of golden light appeared on Wu-Ming's hand, and slowly condensed into a ball of light. Wu-Ming controlled the ball of light to move, and then returned to his finger. Energy with life, how interesting. Wu-Ming dispelled the ball of light, and the ball of light turned into energy and dissipated in the air. As the name implied, these energies had life, but they wouldn't die. After these energies were used up, they would come to the atmosphere, and become part of the atmosphere's energy. Let's not talk about that for now. In such an environment, can humans really survive? Wu Ming sighed. After all, the environment of this world was a little too harsh. However, regarding whether or not there were humans, Wu Ming only expressed his opinion with a sigh. There must be humans alive. Putting aside the fact that Wu Ming was attracted by a certain human's words, humans weren't creatures that would perish easily. But if that's all, how could humans be forced to this point? Wu Ming said, somewhat puzzled. If it was really only the threat that Wu Ming saw just now, then with the wisdom of humans, Wu Ming didn't believe that they couldn't deal with it. And at that moment, there was a roar. Boom boom! The cave Wu Ming was in was directly buried, and Wu Ming was buried alive. Outside, a huge dragon was flying, facing off against a group of beings that looked like robots. The robots that looked like humans flew in the sky as if they were on standby, waiting for the dragon to attack. Roar! The dragon roared at the group of beings that looked like robots, and then a dragon's breath condensed in its mouth. Boom! The dragon's breath exploded at the robots, making a huge roar. That's right. It seemed like this was the culprit that caused the cave to collapse and bury Wu Ming. The powerful dragon's breath shot at the group of flying robots. No matter how one looked at it, these robots couldn't possibly withstand it. However, these robots moved. A circular magical formation was cast by many robots, blocking in front of these robots. Then, the dragon's breath sprayed on this translucent magical formation. Immediately after, the dragon's breath was easily diverted by the magical formation like a ray of light shining on a mirror. An incomparably terrifying dragon's breath swept across the surrounding area, causing a series of explosions. Boom! Yes, I'm afraid that the dragon's breath will attack the cave Wu Ming is in. These robots will be helpful too. Roar! As if seeing that its attack was diverted, the dragon roared angrily. Damn it! You bunch of scrap metal! A huge roar came from the dragon's mouth. Attack refraction complete. Target confirmed. Dragon spirit. Begin annihilation. The robot flying at the front of the group of robots was like a leader, muttering. The robots stretched out their hands, and magical formations appeared from their hands as if they were ready to annihilate the so-called dragon spirit in front of them. The leader robot spoke. Pseudo-cannon. At that moment, Wu Ming's voice was heard. I see. It's because of your existence that humans can't survive. Chapter 4:12. Who's there? The giant dragon looked around and roared vigilantly. The robots that were ready to attack also stopped moving and waited while scanning the surroundings. Just a traveler, don't worry about it. A voice suddenly came from the middle of the dragon and robots, and Wu Ming's figure appeared there. What? When did you appear? I didn't even notice you? The giant dragon said in surprise. In his perception, the place where Wu Ming was located did not have the slightest energy fluctuation. It was like a mass of air. This was the effect of Wu Ming's shielding technique. Not only was there the magic of Yggdrasil, World Tree, but there was also the magic of Loon magic. The auxiliary magic of Yggdrasil, World Tree, was quite powerful. Without special skills or tools, it was impossible to detect it. Although the robots didn't look surprised, judging from the weapons they raised, these robots were also very vigilant. Scanning. There is no information about this person in the database. Unable to determine his race. Temporarily determined to be an unknown species. Current status unknown, suspected to be hostile, the robot leader said in a cold tone. Forget about this group of Kikai species. Which race are you from? Do you want to poke your nose into my business? The giant dragon said in a rather irritable tone. Because it could not see the details of the enemy, it was even more irritable since it was already released from prison. Even the robots with the database could not find out Wu Ming's identity, let alone this giant dragon. Is this world divided into forces by race? The two sides are called dragon and Kikai species. Wu Ming looked at the giant dragon, then looked at the robots. Through the information exchanged between the two sides, Wu Ming also understood their race. The giant dragon was the dragon, and the robots were called Kikai species. It was a very appropriate and simple name. Do you think I wanted to? I was obediently waiting in the cave over there. You guys buried me with an explosion, so I had no choice but to come. Wu-Ming pointed at the cave that had turned into a pile of rubble and said helplessly. Speaking of which, I need some information. I wonder who can provide it to me. Just treat it as an apology. Wu-Ming maintained his smile as he looked at the giant dragon and Kikai, waiting for their reply. This group has no reason to provide you with information. This group refuses, said the leader of the mechas. Even so, the group of mechas didn't make any other moves. They only maintained their defensive stance. However, for these Kikai species, as long as they didn't attack them, they wouldn't retaliate. However, to the arrogant and hot-tempered dragon elite, the colossal dragon elite, who thought highly of themselves and had to hand over information just because they provoked them, the colossal dragon elite thought, who are you? Do you want to die? If you want information, you'll have to survive my attacks first, roared the colossal dragon. Then, it opened its mouth and countless energy that was different from magic power gathered in it. Then, it shot it at Wu-Ming. The scorching dragon's breath was shot at Wu-Ming. The surrounding air had begun to distort due to the high temperature. Perhaps even steel would be melted by the dragon's breath. To be able to defend and reflect this attack, it seems that these Kikai species are not to be trifled with. Wu-Ming looked at the Kikai species that didn't move and thought in his heart. Then, Wu-Ming looked at the attack that was coming at him. However, in the face of such a powerful attack, Wu-Ming didn't do anything. Boom! There was a big explosion at Wu-Ming's position. Because the speed of this attack was really, to Wu-Ming, too slow. Wu-Ming's voice came from behind the colossal dragon. What? How is that possible? The colossal dragon was in disbelief. Although the Kikai species' faces didn't change much, their eyes that were constantly producing data also exposed their inner situation. This was the effect caused by Wu-Ming using the Phoenix incarnation that was activated in an instant to teleport. However, because the body wasn't the original body, the duration of the Phoenix incarnation was reduced to 1 second. However, 1 second was enough for Wu-Ming. Then it's my turn. Wu-Ming smiled slightly and then began to chant. Seeing Wu-Ming chanting, the colossal dragon was very disdainful. For the dragon spirit race that had extremely high magic resistance, if it wasn't the forest spirit race that was best at using magic, there was no need to pay attention to other people's magic. But I am the strongest and the one who holds all victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a devil, I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. Seeing Wu-Ming who was just chanting, the colossal dragon felt a sense of crisis. It can cause me harm. And when Wu-Ming finished chanting, the colossal dragon felt that something was wrong. I must stop him. The colossal dragon's inner alarm bell rang. When Wu-Ming was chanting, the colossal dragon attacked. Die! The colossal dragon roared and turned around to wave its giant claws at Wu-Ming. For the dragon spirit race that had extremely high physical fitness, in addition to using magic, its physical strength was also super strong. Except for a few races, almost no one of the races could take a claw from the dragon spirit race. However, when the dragon spirit race swung its claws at Wu-Ming, Wu-Ming raised his fist that was quite young for the colossal dragon. However, it was this hand that gave the colossal dragon an even more incomparably dangerous feeling. Because this body was weakened, Wu-Ming was prepared to add a strengthening spell. You have shining yellow. Well, forget it. It would be troublesome if I accidentally killed you. However, after thinking for a while, Wu-Ming stopped the strengthening spell. Just like Wu-Ming said, it would be troublesome if he killed it directly. Wu-Ming still needed information. Wu-Ming's words naturally reached the colossal dragon's ears, but this made the colossal dragon even angrier. The colossal dragon swung its claws even faster. Then, the colossal dragon's claws collided with Wu-Ming's fist. Generally speaking, when a huge figure that was hundreds of meters tall faced a weakling that was less than 2 meters tall, the weaker side would lose. However, Wu-Ming wasn't a weakling, but a super strong one. Boom! The colossal dragon that collided with Wu-Ming's fist was slammed into the ground, leaving a dragon-shaped groove on the ground full of gravel. How is this possible? The colossal dragon that fell into the groove of the ground, its bones were broken, some were even shattered, and it was almost unable to move. It said slowly in an unbelievable tone. Then, the colossal dragon fainted. The unknown new species has a few powerful brute force. It is not recommended to face it head-on. Temporarily retreat. The leader of the mech armors analyzed and said. Then, a diamond-shaped space opened behind these mech armors, and the mech armors began to retreat. Did I say you can go again? Chapter 4:13. Did I say that I would let you go again? Wu Ming's voice rang out. However, this did not affect the departure of the Jikai bastards. There's no fear at all, Wu Ming said gloomily. He didn't feel any fear from Jikai. However, I can't just let you leave like this. Since they were called the Mechai species, they must have something like a database. For Wu Ming, who wanted information, this was like finding a water source in the desert. He couldn't let it go. Well, but I don't need that many mecha seeds. As the leader, you're pretty good. After all, the leader usually had the most information, right? Little N. After saying that, Wu Ming cast Heaven Lock on Leader Kakai, who had already entered the dimensional space. Bang! However, the Heaven Lock that had just entered bounced back out. What? Wu Ming was a little surprised. Although Heaven Lock was not an offensive weapon, this was the first time Enkidu had failed to achieve anything. Putting away Heaven Lock, Wu Ming looked at the closed dimensional space and gave up on the idea of capturing Leader Kakai. Perhaps the performance of the machines was different. Compared to the leader of the mechanical triumphant race which had already closed its dimensional gate, there were a few mechanical triumphant races which had yet to close their dimensional gates. Looking at the speed at which they closed the dimensional door, this was more than enough for Wu Ming. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you a curse. Evil people can't hit me. After quickly chanting the incantation, Wu Ming instantly arrived in front of a randomly selected Mecha Triumph-type dimensional door and went in. Pseudo-reflex. Pseudo-reflex. Accompanied by the emotionless robotic lowly voice, a barrier appeared in front of Wu Ming, who had just entered the dimensional door. When Wu Ming saw this barrier, he understood that the mechanical triumphant race could use a kind of reflex ability. Enkidu was caught off guard by the mechanical triumphant race's reflective barrier just now. But you're still too young to deal with me. Wu Ming's Phoenix avatar didn't simply increase Wu Ming's speed, but it reduced the flow of time around him and accelerated his own time to reach super high speed. This involved the power of time. In this way, not only Wu Ming's physical speed, but also Wu Ming's consciousness and reaction ability. As a result, Wu Ming easily bypassed the barrier amidst his opponent's extremely slow movements. With a wave of his hand, the heavenly lock appeared and bound this mecha triumphant race. Then, Wu Ming accelerated and pulled the mechanical triumphant race out of the dimensional door. Wu Ming looked at the rest of the mechanical triumphant race that had been completely sealed and retreated, and he didn't say anything. Well, even if it's an ordinary mechanical triumphant race, I'm already satisfied to know the basic information of this world. Then, Wu Ming looked at the mechanical triumphant race that was tied up by him. Because of the mechanical triumphant race being tied up by the mechanical triumphant race, it could no longer use its magical power to fight back, and the power of a mechanical triumphant race alone was not enough to break free from the mechanical triumphant race. It was a female mechanical triumphant race, and it was a lowly of about 10 years old. A small part of its body was covered by metal armor, from neck to chest. The entire lower abdomen and below thighs were all mechanical metal, and a large number of mechanical metal structures were exposed in the elbows, shoulders, waist, and abdomen. There were several mechanical wings behind it, which didn't look like they were used to assist in flight, but more like combat support. There was a rather complicated mechanical intelligence disc on the right side of its head, which looked quite mysterious. Its eyes were yellow in alert mode full of data, and there was an analytical lens in front of its left eye. There was also a long-barreled technology gun for combat on its arm, as well as some other auxiliary machinery. After all, Wu Ming didn't know much about these things, and he didn't pay much attention to them. In addition, there were two tail-like cables behind the mechanical triumphant race's body, which gave Wu Ming the feeling of an antenna. The most obvious thing was the gorgeous rose-colored knee-length hair of this mechanical triumphant race, as well as its beautiful face. Although her messy long hair looked quite unkempt, it gave people a very soft feeling. Wu Ming touched the mechanical triumphant race's hair, and sure enough, it was quite soft, but the toughness of the mechanical triumphant race's hair was super strong. Soft steel wire, can be compared to this. Prompt: the connection has been cut off from this machine. You can't invade the connection through this machine. The mechanical triumphant race said. Sure enough, it's worthy of being a machine life. It was abandoned after being captured. Wu-Ming said helplessly. But there was nothing he could do about it. According to reason, it was just an ordinary mechanical triumphant race member. He was afraid that the other party wouldn't choose to fight against an unknown enemy who could knock out a dragon spirit with one punch. Often, a programmed machine system was the most rational existence. I can only say that it's worthy of being called a mechanical triumphant race. Wu-Ming sighed. I received an order when I was cut off from the host computer to initiate the self-destruction program. I can't leave any information to the enemy. The self-destruction program, countdown, start dash, the mechanical triumphant race lowly said blankly, and then began to mumble. However, although Kikai was a robot, it was actually a product of mystery. To put it simply, it was not a science, it was still a magic. Question: the self-destruction program can't be started. The elf can't be used. The self-destruction program failed to start. Mechanical triumphant race said faintly. Of course. Your body's energy has already been restrained. How can you use your ability? Wu-Ming couldn't let the database that he had worked so hard to obtain run away. I repeat, I will not provide you with any information. Mechanical triumphant race looked at Wu-Ming indifferently and did not do anything else. With such a tough attitude, it's impossible to get any information. After all, no matter how hard you torture a machine, it would only make others think that you're destroying her, which had nothing to do with the abandoned mechanical triumphant race. Collis is not here. It's a bit inconvenient. After all, Collis was similar to mechanical triumphant race, but Collis was not as emotionless as mechanical triumphant race. Since being tough didn't work, Wu-Ming didn't force it. After all, there was still someone over there who could get information. With that in mind, Wu-Ming looked at the unconscious dragon over there. Then, Wu-Ming said to the mechanical triumphant race. If that's the case, then I won't get any information from you. Tell me your name first. The order you received was not to leak information, right? Things like names can't be considered information. After all, it's not easy to address someone without a name. After pondering for a moment, the mechanical triumphant race spoke. Mechanical triumphant race serial number C207PR4F57T9. What I want is a name. Don't you have a name? Wu-Ming was even more helpless. Were the mechanical triumphant race really just machines? I don't understand. The mechanical triumphant race was silent. After a moment of silence, mechanical triumphant race spoke again. Question: what about Hublitus? Let's call her that for the time being. After all, this was the name she gave herself, so she would use it as such for the time being. Although it didn't look like a name at all. Then, Hublitus, as the price for not getting any information from you, you need to follow me. Do you agree? Wu-Ming looked into Hublitus' eyes and said. Agreed, Hubrick said curtly. Then, let's see what we can get out of this giant dragon. Wu-Ming looked at the giant dragon. Chapter 4:14. After that, Wu-Ming gently woke up the dragon that was unable to move due to the broken bones in its body. Later, under the dragon's horrified expression, Wu-Ming successfully, gently, extracted a lot of information. This world was called Disbode. It was a world where gods existed. These gods were called Old Deus. The energy of this world was not magic, but a kind of energy called spirit. That's right. It was the energy with life on Wu-Ming's finger. Phantasma, created by God. There were all kinds of phantasma, so there was no uniform appearance. Dragonia, created by God, had the appearance of a dragon. It had extremely high magic ability and magic resistance, and its physical fitness was also extremely strong. It could also use its past and future power in the present. It could be said to be an extremely powerful race. Gigant, created by the gods. As the name suggested, the giants were extremely tall and had extremely strong physical attributes. They were a powerful race that could compete with the dragon goblins. They had always been on good terms with the goblins. The sky wings, flugel, were god-killing weapons created by God. They had extremely powerful strength that could kill god species. They looked like a group of humans with wings and had extremely long lifespans. They were currently living in the city formed by the fantasy breed Avanti-Heim. They had built a city in the sky called Avanti-Heim. In addition, they were also a race with a strong thirst for knowledge. Because of this thirst for knowledge, they would collect all kinds of books. They once emptied all the books in the capital of forest elves. When it came to Sky Wing, they had to talk about the god who created them, the god of war Artesius. According to what Wu Ming learned from the dragon spirit seed, the god spirit seed Arthas was the most powerful god spirit among all the gods. According to gossip, these Sky Wing were actually created by Artesius to kill him, so he felt that he was too strong, and no one could defeat him, so he created god of war Artesius to fight him. Wu Ming was quite interested in this god of war. The forest elves were created by the gods and created a large variety of magic. Their characteristic was their long ears. In terms of magic attainment, they could be said to be the strongest existence among all species. Goblins were created by the gods. They had dark skin and looked like the dwarves in the myths who forged weapons for the gods. Although their magical attainments were not as good as the forest goblins, they were not to be underestimated. Strictly speaking, the goblins' magical attainments were in the aspect of manufacturing. They were able to create magical tools and weapons. It was said that the goblins had even created a magic airship. The fairy race was created by God and could be said to be in existence similar to the forest elves. They had an extremely good relationship with the forest elves and were allies. Ex Machina, created by God, usually acted in groups. The Ex Machina were basically linked together, existing in the form of the internet. The Mechai species had super advanced calculation abilities. Through the Mechai species equipment and their own abilities, refracting the dragon breath of the dragon elite species was a piece of cake. Other than that, as long as they had been attacked once or seen a strategy, it would no longer be useful. Moreover, they could design the same weapon. In theory, they could be infinitely powerful. It was simply a bug. However, they could be said to be a group of people who would not attack others unless they were attacked. As long as no one provoked them, they would not provoke others for no reason. God knows what that dragon elite species did to provoke the Mechai species. The Demonia race was created by God. In simple terms, they were some demons that lived on the earth. The giant centipede that Wu Ming encountered before belonged to the Demonia race. Speaking of which, the god who created this race was really disgusting. Wu Ming thought of those tentacles and mucus again. The Damper race was created by God. In simple terms, they were life forms similar to vampires. They could not live without sucking blood. Lunamana, a race created by God on the huge red moon. By the way, there were 2 moons in this world, and they existed both day and night. Rather than calling them moons, it would be more accurate to call them satellites that were extremely close to this planet and moved in the same orbit. The Wer-Beast race was created by God. They were basically beast men. They did not have elves in their body, and they could not use magic, but they had physical abilities that surpassed the limit. The Siren race was created by God. They could only live in the water and could not go ashore. They looked like mermaids. Because all of them were women, they needed men from other races to help them produce offspring. Because the Siren race had rich water essence in their body, a kind of elves, they had the ability to attract other elves, and having water essence in their body was equivalent to having a natural charm skill. So it was quite helpful for the Siren race to reproduce. In addition to these races, there was also a kind of intellectual creature, human beings. Human beings were not created by God. Not only did they not have elves in their body, they could not use magic, and they did not have excellent physical fitness like the orc race. It could be said that human beings were the weakest intellectual creatures. Therefore, human beings were not called human race by other races. They were simply called human beings. But that was not a big deal. Even if they were weak, they could still survive in this big family of many races. Just like in a fairy tale, the world created God, and God created various races, which made the world more colorful. It was originally like this. The gods and the various races they created lived peacefully in the world. Then, because of the selfish desires of their creators, several races went to war with each other under the command of their creators. The powerful gods, because they all wanted to be the only god, began an endless battle to compete for the throne of the only god. According to the dragon spirit, the war that affected the world has lasted for a year, and it was not very clear when it started. The races that went to war kept fighting, and the races that didn't want to go to war kept quiet. But according to the dragon spirit, Those races that didn't want to go to war were killed by other gods, so they didn't go to war. After all, the races went to war because of the order of their creators. However, it was good to have one less enemy, and other races didn't bother them. But only human beings, other races didn't pay attention to them. Even if they were affected, they wouldn't care. Even other races didn't regard human beings as a life form on the same level as themselves. Why was that? The dragon spirit said the reason. Because human beings were weak. Wuming also guessed that a race that was not created by God, had a short lifespan, had no elves in their body, couldn't use magic, had low physical fitness, and posed no threat. How could they be valued by other races? The weak had no right to speak. That was the cruelty of the world. Chapter 4:15. This is also why I heard that sigh. Wuming was relieved. How could he be willing to be looked down upon and trampled on like this? However, even so, humans continued to exist and survive in this world war that had lasted for tens of thousands of years. No matter how desperate or unfavorable it was, humans still continued to struggle at death's door. As expected, this is how humans should be. Wuming walked on the road and smiled. Hubletus followed behind Wuming obediently. Facing Wuming's smile, Hubletus was very puzzled. I'm puzzled. Why is Nameless smiling so happily? The human race was clearly on the verge of collapse. Hubletus can't understand. By the way, Hubletus asked Wuming for his name after he had a name, but we told him that he was just a nameless passerby and didn't need to remember. Therefore, Hubletus called Wuming Nameless. This made no difference to Wuming. After Wuming heard Hubletus's question, he stopped and turned around. But even so, humans continue to live. Don't underestimate humans too much, Hubletus. Maybe at some point, humans will do something unexpected. Hubletus tilted his head, still puzzled. Hubletus, I don't understand. Also, because Wuming had asked Huberic to call himself by his name since he already had a name, he didn't need to call himself this machine anymore. Therefore, Huberic changed this machine to Huberic. However, Wuming simply patted her head in the face of such a Huberic. You really don't understand now, but I'll think of a way to make you understand. Wuming smiled. Even if he couldn't get information from Hubletus, Wuming didn't let him go. Therefore, Wuming had a plan to let Kekai gain feelings. It was clearly a life created by God, but it had no feelings, whether it was taken away or not. This was the only thing that made Wuming quite unhappy. Therefore, Wuming set two small goals. He wanted to save the humans of this world and let Kekai have feelings. Then, does this have anything to do with what Ben Huberic is wearing? Huberic pointed at the clothes he was wearing. Wuming took out a large hooded cloak that he had used for adventuring in the past from the Golden Ripples, modified it, and put it on Hubletus. By the way, Wuming was now wearing a hooded cloak that he once used for adventuring. Huberic is a Kekai species. Huberic doesn't need to wear clothes. He doesn't need to hide his identity when he's by John Doe's side. Why should he wear clothes? After saying that, Huberic tugged at his clothes again. As everyone knew, because of the Kekai species' consciousness and their mechanical bodies, the Kekai species basically didn't wear clothes. The only cover they wore was the armor that they would only wear in battle. Although they weren't as attractive as the human body. Cough cough. At least that's what Wuming thought. No matter what, he wouldn't be in heat because of a blow-up doll. Moreover, Wuming was going to let Huberic gain feelings. First of all, he had to let Huberic have a human sense of honor and disgrace. Most importantly, who the F***ck knew that Kekai species usually didn't wear clothes. Wuming had already given up. After all, Huberic was still at the level of treating him as a tool. He couldn't rush it. Let's take it slow. Well, actually, my identity is very mysterious. In order not to expose me, I put you in disguise. Wuming explained awkwardly. Yes, by the way, the Earth Dragon spirit that Wuming questioned had been healed and released by Wuming. It would be great if the Earth Dragon spirit didn't expose Wuming's information, but it would be even better if he passed on the news of Wuming to other races. He broke and even shattered all the bones of an adult Earth Dragon spirit with one punch, and it was done with mercy. Wuming estimated that if this news reached the ears of the god of war Artesius, he would probably be very excited. Because even the skywing species, known as the god-killing weapon, needs everyone to work together to suppress an adult earth dragon spirit like me. Even the person from the skywing species had to risk his life to barely suppress an adult earth dragon spirit like me, but you actually defeated me with one punch. Who the hell are you? These were the words of the extremely weak earth dragon spirit at that time. To be honest, the earth dragon spirit really had an advantage in this world. Resistance to magic, extremely strong magic abilities, the ability to gather the power of the future and the past for use in the present, and an extremely strong physical body. It could be said that a long time ago, in addition to the god species occupying the top position and the fantasy species being rare, the second most powerful race was the earth dragon spirit. However, unfortunately, that could only be in the past. Now, the earth dragon spirit was almost out of people. Hint: the Kikai species had once fought with the dragon essence species. In the end, all the members of the dragon essence species that participated in the battle were wiped out. Previously, when Wu Ming was puzzled, Zayubarik explained as such. Although Zayubarik did not tell Wu Ming the specific situation, Wu Ming could almost guess it. The Earth Dragon Spirit had used the ability to copy the Earth Dragon Spirit's attack and attack the Earth Dragon Spirit, wiping out all the Earth Dragon Spirit that participated in the battle. As a result, there weren't many Dragon Essence seeds left now. Coincidentally, the creator of the Earth Dragon Spirit had died. As a result, the Earth Dragon Spirit was at an even greater disadvantage. At that time, the Earth Dragon Spirit had also looked at Zayubarik with resentment. It seemed that the battle between the Earth Dragon Spirit and the Earth Dragon Spirit was not an accident. By the way, according to the Earth Dragon Spirit, after witnessing the power of the Earth Dragon Spirit, the various races had ordered that they were strictly prohibited from provoking the Earth Dragon Spirit. Back to the topic, if the Earth Dragon Spirit spread the news, although other races and even gods would be vigilant, it would pose a threat to the various gods and races. An unknown powerhouse comparable to the god species was wandering casually on the ground. Once this news spread, the other races would pay attention when they fought wantonly. If they accidentally provoked that unknown expert, it would definitely be a business that would only be a loss. So, where is John Doe going? Zayubarik asked. Of course, it's a place where there are humans, Wu Ming said without hesitation. Firstly, he would be able to observe and help the humans of this world. Secondly, if he wanted Zayubarik to have human emotions, he would have to let her live in the human world. As for Wu Ming, he was just a non-human who understood humans very well. Then, let's set a small goal first. Find the humans. With that said, two figures, one big and one small, wearing black cloaks, walked in a certain direction, moving forward unhurriedly. Chapter 4:16. Because Wu Ming did not deliberately search for traces of humans, Wu Ming and Zayubarik slowly advanced on the ground. Along the way, because Wu Ming used a shielding spell, they did not encounter any trouble. They only encountered a few demons who were lucky enough to see Wu Ming and Zayubarik. Then, these demons were treated as human beings by the Wu Ming cult. Wu Ming saw many people of other races. Because of the shielding spell, they did not discover Wu Ming and Zayubarik. However, many times, these hostile races did not attack. Instead, they were vigilant and left after a few words. It seemed like the dragon spirit had spread the news of Wu Ming, and now, these races had restrained themselves a little. Wu Ming and Zayubarik continued to search for traces of humans on the ground. Because the two of them did not need to eat, their speed was not slow. At this moment, Wu Ming and Zayubarik arrived above a cliff canyon. There are elven skeletons everywhere. Wu Ming sighed as he looked at the tiny grayish-white objects floating in the sky like snow and the scene of the ground covered in snow. No wonder the ground was desolate. There were snowy mountains everywhere, and there were piles of skeletons that could destroy the bodies of creatures everywhere. It was not incomprehensible for the ground to be desolate. Moreover, these elven skeletons sometimes changed like the weather, like heavy snow and light snow. It was not surprising that the density of the skeletons would increase from time to time. Hint: Zayubarik has the removal liquid to remove elven skeletons in his body. He is not afraid of these skeletons, Zayubarik said as he stood behind Wu Ming with his hood on. Well, I'm not afraid. Wu Ming shrugged. These skeletons were still 20,000 years away from corroding the scales of a dragon of origin. There are a lot of elven reactions below. What do you think it is, Zayubarak? Wuming asked with a smile, like a brother guessing a riddle for his sister. Huberic's eyes changed, and data flowed through his eyes. Then, Huberic spoke. A goblin's magic airship that crashed, Huberic said calmly. You're really unromantic. I didn't mean to ask you what's down there, Wuming said with a wry smile. Huberic doesn't understand. Huberic continued to tilt his head in confusion. Well, forget it. It's unrealistic to make you look like a human now. Wuming shrugged, then began to think about Zayubarik's words. A gnome's magic airship that crashed? Wuming stroked his chin, considering if he should go and take a look. Question. Does John Doe want to go down and take a look? Huberic said expressionlessly. Since it's a crashed magic airship, let's go down and take a look. After making the decision, Wuming and Huberic came to the bottom of the canyon in their own ways. As soon as they reached the bottom of the canyon, they saw a huge bronze airship. However, it was a dilapidated magic airship that was half destroyed. It looked like it had been there for some time. Visually, this airship was hundreds of meters long. It had to be said that the goblins were really interesting to be able to create such a huge aircraft. Wuming sized up this place and felt the increasingly rich elven bones. Wuming spoke. Let's go in first. After all, even if the elven bones couldn't cause harm to the two of them, no one would like to stay under threat. When it was drizzling, even if it didn't affect them much, who wouldn't want to use an umbrella if they had one? Of course, except for those who like to get wet. Then, Huberic nodded faintly and followed Wuming in. But, did something occupy this place after the magic airship crashed? It's treating this place as its own nest. Wuming felt that there was a biological reaction inside this stronghold. There was no doubt that there was some creature in this airship. However, with Wuming's strength, there was no need to be afraid of those things unless the divine seed came. At this moment, Wuming stopped. Someone is coming, Wuming said. That's right, in Wuming's perception, there were 3 humans. Huberic, you can use optical camouflage, right? Wuming asked. After all, this was a necessary ability for a robot. Confused? Optical camouflage? Huberic tilted his head and said doubtfully. That's the way, Wuming said and cast an invisibility spell on himself. Wuming's entire person disappeared. Understood. Pseudo-reflex. Huberic said and activated a device on his body. Then, Huberic also disappeared. Refracted the light through a reflective mirror? Wuming nodded. However, compared to Wuming's concealment, Huberic's position still had the elf. Simply put, it was the magic residue. Sure enough, simply refracting the light in this magical world is still a bit insufficient. With that said, Wuming waved his hand and eliminated Huberic's residual elf reaction. Stay aside, don't make any movements, and don't make any noise, Wuming said. Although Wuming couldn't see Huberic's face, Huberic's voice came. Understood. Then the scene fell into silence. After a few minutes, 3 silhouettes quietly sneaked over from afar. Wuming had a good look at their appearances. They were wearing gray and brown hooded cloaks, scarves that served as masks, large goggles, tattered pants, and brown boots. It could be said that there was not a single part of their bodies that was exposed to the outside world. Their clothes looked quite shabby, but Wuming was sure that they were indeed human. The 3 of them leaned against the wall of the magic airship and squatted down. How's the compass? One of the rough voices came from one of them, and the person who spoke was an uncle. After hearing the middle-aged man's question, one of the 3 who seemed to be the leader stretched out his hand from under the cloak. Even the hand that was hidden under the cloak was covered with gloves. It seemed like he was fully armed. He was holding a compass disc in his hand. The needle on the disc was constantly spinning, and it looked like it was broken. Sure enough, the compass is no longer useful because of the black ash. The leader frowned. Now we can only rely on our own eyes to find the enemy. Be careful, Ivan, Ole, the leader called out their names. Yes. The 2 people behind the leader nodded heavily. The black ash is getting thicker. Hurry up. With that, the 3 of them sneaked into the magic airship. After the 3 of them entered the interior of the magic airship, Wuming and Huberic revealed themselves. Do you see that, Huberic? The humans are still trying to survive. Huberic didn't answer Wooming, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Let's go. There's a big guy here. Without us, I'm afraid they'll be at risk of being wiped out. Then, Wooming and Huberic entered the magic airship and disappeared again. Chapter 4:17. Wooming didn't immediately follow the three humans. Instead, he took his time to tour the magic airship. Although the magic airship was damaged and most of the buildings in the airship had collapsed, it still couldn't hide the advanced nature of the magic airship. It couldn't hide the advanced technology of the goblins. Speaking of which, can your Kikai race also make a magic-guided airship like this? Silent Wonder asked Zayubalas. Answer. Through analysis and replication, the Kikai race can complete the creation of the magic airship. Data flowed through Hablitus's eyes as he answered Wooming. In other words, you have no way to innovate on your own? His footsteps didn't stop as he continued walking. The Kikai race will evolve according to the environment of the current era. Hablitus was silent for a moment, then said, I see. I'm interested in the god who created you. Wooming laughed. However, Wooming remembered that the dragon goblin had said that the creators of many races had disappeared. Some were killed by other gods, and some disappeared for unknown reasons. After that, Wooming glanced at Hablitus. If the Kikai race were to exist, did their creator disappear on his own or was he killed by other gods? Wooming speculated that both outcomes were possible. Firstly, that god had such a powerful race. It was almost impossible for a god to kill that god. However, there was no one to command the Kikai race now. Therefore, Wooming felt that it was very likely that the god had disappeared on his own for unknown reasons. Secondly, the Mekai species had the ability to copy and reflect the enemy's attacks, which could be called a bug. The god who created them was likely to be attacked by the other gods. If the god was unscrupulous, the god who created them might still be killed by the other gods. That was why Wooming felt that both were possible. By the way, can you tell me who the god who created you was? Wooming asked. Although it involved some intelligence issues, it was still unknown whether he could get Hablitus to speak. What if he succeeded? According to the records in the database, the god who created us Kikai species is called Sail Tower. He disappeared 10,000 years ago. After hearing Wooming ask about the god who created him, Zayubarik was silent for a moment before explaining to Wooming. Wooming looked at Huberic in surprise. Wooming didn't expect Huberic to speak. After all, this was a so-called secret. After that, Huberic really didn't say anything else. So Huberic only told me the name of the god who created them. He didn't expect to get any information anyway, so it didn't make a difference. At that moment, the magic airship started shaking violently. Wooming and Huberic stopped. Has that thing made a move? Wooming spread his magic power and sensed the direction of the three humans. They were a species that was quickly approaching them. Demon spawn? After confirming that the enemy was just an ordinary demon, Wooming began to move in the direction of the three humans. Let's go, Huberic. The timeline was pushed forward by a few minutes. After the three humans entered here, they moved forward carefully and seriously. While investigating the surrounding passageways, a rather young man among the three of them shouted excitedly, Rick! Ivan! Come and see! The young man, O'Ray, discovered something and became excited. However, the leader, Rick, and Uncle Ivan looked at O'Ray seriously and gestured to him to be quiet. O'Ray only then reacted. In this era, making a scene meant death. Even the humans in their temporary base didn't dare to go out much for fear of attracting disaster. However, since it was something that could make O'Ray excited, it must be something good. Then, the three followed O'Ray to a room. A world map drawn by the goblins? And it's the latest version. Rick was also a little excited, but as a qualified leader, he wouldn't lose his cool. That's right, even the division of the forces of each race is clearly marked. This time we've picked up a big fish. Ivan was also happy. Ivan, O'Ray, modify our map according to the goblins' map. Be quick. Rick ordered. Yes. Pledge to the will. Just like the slogan of Y, after Ivan and O'Ray finished speaking, the two of them took out a map and a series of tools from their backpacks, such as a quill and a right-angle board, and began to modify the map. Rick, on the other hand, went to a device and began to study it. A communication device for the goblins. Rick looked at the lines of text that flowed out of the device that looked like a telescope and said calmly. For Rick, it was necessary to learn the language of other races. Therefore, Rick began to decipher this information. How much more are they going to destroy this planet? Rick said softly with anger and sadness. It seemed that Rick saw a shocking secret. At this moment, the entire magic airship began to shake. Rumble. Leave quickly. Rick immediately ordered. This situation meant that something was about to attack. Ivan stepped out of the room first. Rick looked at O'Ray, who wanted to take the goblin's device away, and said with a frown. Don't bother with the devices that need to be activated by the elves. But O'Ray was unwilling to give up. Really, it was not easy to find valuable information, and he was unwilling to be unable to take it away. Just say it if you want to die. Rick suddenly became ruthless. O'Ray gritted his teeth and gave up on the goblin's device, and followed Rick out of the room. Because the structure of this magic airship extended in all directions, even if most of it was destroyed, the interior was still relatively chaotic. Only people like Wooming and Huberic could not get lost on their first try. Rick and the other two probably used some method to record the route when they came in. If they wandered in here, it was likely that they would be killed by the hidden dangers. Right now, the three of them were hiding in a cavern that had collapsed. They adjusted their breathing and tried their best not to be detected by the demons. The three of them had already realized that the enemy this time was the demons. The hearts of the three of them fell silent. Demons were existences that treated humans as food. The feeling of watching one's friends and family being eaten by demons with one's own eyes was simply maddening. But even so, Ivan, I order you to die here. Rick tried to be as cold as possible, but he still could not hide the sorrow in his words. It was already a routine. Among those who went out to collect information, once they encountered a similar danger, one of them must be sacrificed to help the others escape. And as the leader, Rick naturally could not be sacrificed. O'Ray was still of the younger generation, so Ivan, who already had a family and children, was the best choice. In an era where humans could not survive, once it was time to sacrifice, it would always be the older person who took this step. Take care of my daughter. Although he was ordered to die, Ivan still maintained a smile, because his death was for his two compatriots to live. He died without regrets. Ivan. O'Ray, who did not go out to collect information, said somewhat unwillingly. But he also knew that in this situation, only Ivan's death was the most beneficial. But in the end, O'Ray still closed his mouth, clenched his teeth, and looked at Ivan with grief and indignation. Uncle Ivan smiled at the two, and then rushed out. Demons! Come! Your food is here! Ivan shouted, and ran toward the raw material room of the magic airship. From the beginning, they had already set the retreat route, including the route of the sacrifice. Ivan was ready to detonate the raw material room, and die together with the demons. The tentacle-like demons did not know, and quickly wriggled in the gaps of the magic airship, crawling toward Ivan. And just as Ivan took out the detonation device, and Rick and O'Ray were about to take the opportunity to leave, a voice came. What I hate the most is tentacles and mucus. Chapter 4:18. As soon as Wooming finished speaking, the demon's tentacles stopped as if it was stunned. Then, a blue transparent substance began to appear on the body of the giant demon. It was ice. In just a second, the demonic seed turned into a lifelike ice sculpture. This made Ivan, who was about to self-destruct, stunned as he stared blankly at the demon that was already very close to him. At such a close distance, Ivan could even feel the cold air coming from the ice sculpture. What's going on? Ivan asked in a trembling voice. Ivan! Get out of there! There are people of other races here. At this time, Rieker shouted at Ivan and then ran toward Ivan with O'Ray. Ivan was reminded and immediately calmed down as he hurried to meet up with Rieker and O'Ray. The three of them were in a state of alert as they looked around. The reason why Rieker and O'Ray came back was because of the strength of the enemy. The enemy was a powerhouse who could instantly freeze the demon, so escaping was impossible. Therefore, Rieker and O'Ray chose to meet up with Ivan. Rieker, what do we do now? Ray gulped and asked nervously. Don't act rashly for now. Since the other party didn't choose to attack us but chose to attack the demon, it means that they are not hostile to us. Leader Riker calmly analyzed. Although that was what he said, Riker's hand was still on his dagger. After all, although the other party could be said to be Ivan's savior, but in this era, there were also people who first gave people hope and then gave people despair, so they must not be careless. Because in this era, carelessness meant death. It's all my fault, Rick. If I could have detonated it earlier, maybe you could have taken the opportunity to escape, Ivan said to Rick with some self-blame, still keeping his vigilant eyes on the surroundings. Don't say that, Ivan. Even if you detonated the material room and bought us time, don't forget that the other party can instantly freeze a demon of this size. If they really wanted to kill us, I don't think we could outrun such a powerhouse. Riker said calmly as he continued to look around vigilantly. That's true, Ivan. Maybe the other party actually wants to save you so that we can leave safely. That way, you can meet Nana. Ray's face was filled with joy and hope as he pretended to be calm and said to Ivan. By the way, Nong Na was Ivan's daughter. Wu-Ming, who was hiding in the dark, was amused. He had to admit that a naive human like Ray could actually survive in this era. Even Wu-Ming, after knowing the current information of this world, had already realized that this was a race war. Wu-Ming still understood the principle that those who were not of his race would have different intentions. Not to mention, humans were a race that was ignored by other powerful races. Ray was truly naive to say such a thing. Don't be silly, Ray. Riker scolded. The other party didn't do anything to us because we're still useful. No one would save us humans. You know that, right? Rick's words shamed Ray to the core. Ray understood that, but he still hoped that someone would come to save them. But Riker, didn't you think the same before? A god that can create humans. Ray's voice became softer and softer until he stopped talking. Humans don't have a god. We humans have to rely on ourselves. Riker glanced at Ray and continued to look around vigilantly. Riker, that person hasn't appeared yet. What's going on? Ivan voiced out his confusion. That's right. Ever since the demon was frozen, Riker, Ray, and Ivan had met up and looked around vigilantly. Even now, that person still hadn't appeared. Now that you mention it, it seems that's true. Ray also realized that something was wrong after hearing Ivan's words. Riker naturally noticed the problem, but Riker thought that the other party was just putting on airs and putting on a show, so he didn't care. However, it had been so long, and the other party still hadn't appeared. That wasn't right. Did he leave? This thought popped up in Ray and Ivan's minds. As the leader, Riker naturally understood what the two of them were thinking, so Riker, Ivan, and Ray had the same idea. But let's wait and see. We can't be careless. Although Riker was confused, he didn't believe that the other party would leave just like that. He continued to be in a stalemate. No race would play with humans so excessively. Other races that saw humans as ants and mice, although there were times when they played with humans, it was impossible for them to take so long. It was the same logic as how a person couldn't play with 3 insects that were smaller than ants for an entire day. No exceptions. Hiding in the dark, Hubert looked at Wu-Ming in confusion. Question, why don't you go down and meet them? Faced with Hubert's question, Wu-Ming, who was deep in thought, came back to his senses. Why don't I go down and meet them? I was going to meet them, but I've changed my mind now. The reason why Wu-Ming said that was because Riker and the others were wary of non-humans. For a long time, the humans in this world had entered an unusually vigilant state because of their desire to survive. Listening to their conversation, it seemed that Riker was a leader-like figure. As a leader, Riker was more vigilant than ordinary humans. To put it simply, it was because humans had been oppressed and hurt for a long time, causing humans to be unusually nervous. As the leader of the entire race, Riker shouldered a heavy burden that others couldn't imagine. Therefore, Riker was more distrustful of other races than others and more vigilant. In that case, if I go up and say, I'm here to help you, it will definitely have the opposite effect, Wu-Ming said bluntly. I don't understand. Then what should Nameless do next? Hubert asked. After thinking for a moment, Wu-Ming looked at Riker and the other two with a smile on his face. Since the other party is so vigilant, Then I'll be a god and play with them. Huberic looked at Wu Ming's smile, tilted his head, and data flowed in his eyes. Nameless, my database shows that your current smile is called a bad taste. How can that be? Cough cough. You still don't understand the heart. You'll understand the true meaning of this smile after you understand the heart. Yes, that's right. Huberic nodded as if he understood. Next, it was time to show his acting skills. Chapter 419. Just as Rick was wondering if the other party had really left, a voice came from the void. Nice to meet you, human. This was Wu Ming changing his voice through magic. The entire space felt like it had fallen into a swamp, making the three of them feel quite heavy. The ancient and deep voice came into their ears. The three of them became even more alert. After hearing this voice, O'Ray and Ivan's body shook, which was a sign of excessive nervousness. Rick, on the other hand, was still in shock, looking around cautiously. Let me introduce myself. I am a god, and I don't come from this world. Another world? Ivan and O'Ray looked at each other and exclaimed, Another world. Rick frowned. Regardless of whether the other party was lying or not, one thing was for sure, and that was the other party's information was unknown. Because he didn't know the other party's identity, he couldn't come up with a plan. I can only rely on the conversation to analyze. Rick thought in his heart. That's right. Another world. For some reason, I came to this world and met you by accident. The deep voice continued. Then, Lord Unknown God, why do you want to save us? Is it purely out of kindness? Rick asked. However, his question sounded like an interrogative question. Hey, Rick. Ivan and O'Ray looked at Rick nervously. Rick was supposed to be the most cautious one, but now he was the most reckless one. However, Rick did this for a reason. With his super advanced observation skills, Rick was able to glean some information from Wu Ming's words. This was a god who was not easily angered. Ha ha ha, as expected of the leader of the humans. Even if I said that I just wanted to help you, you wouldn't believe me. Wu Ming laughed. Ivan and Ol were stunned, while Rick's lips curled into a smile. That's right. I have a purpose. Wu Ming's words made Ivan and O'Ray's body tense up. After all, even if he was from another world, he was still a god. Leader of the humans, Rick, I want to make a bet with you. Rick frowned when he heard this. What bet? Rick asked bluntly. I'll bet on the possibility of being human. Rick felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His body trembled slightly and his pupils contracted. Possibility? Ivan and O'Ray, on the other hand, looked confused. Then, why are you betting on the possibility of humans with me? Rick asked in a heavy tone. In the world I live in, I am the guardian god who protects humanity. Do you understand? Wu Ming explained. Rick's pupils contracted again, and then he smiled. Is it possible for humans? Although Wu Ming was wearing a mask, he could sense that Rick's smile contained a lot of meaning. Sadness, joy, excitement, dissatisfaction. Almost all positive and negative emotions were contained within. How about it? Do you want to bet? The bet is that the winner can order the loser once. Any kind of order. What do you think? Wu Ming continued asking. I'll bet with you. Rick answered Wu Ming with unprecedented enthusiasm. Ha ha ha, very good. Leader of the humans, Rick. I look forward to your actions. After that, the heavy pressure on the three disappeared. The god left. Hey, Rick. Is it really a good idea to make such a rash decision? Ivan and O'Ray looked at Rick worriedly. Although this unknown god gave off a harmless feeling, they should still be cautious. After all, Rick was their leader. If something were to happen to him, what would they do? Don't worry, I will win. Rick looked at Ivan and O'Ray. Ivan and O'Ray looked into Rick's eyes and were stunned. This pair of eyes contained an unprecedented light, filled with faith and hope. It was as if Rick had become a completely different person. By the way, what is the possibility of being human? O'Ray was completely confused. That guy is surprisingly emotional, Rick said, baffled. Huh. Ivan and O'Ray looked at each other, even more confused. Think about it, that guy is a god from another world who protects the humans, and the humans under his protection live a happy life. But when they come to this world, they find that the humans here are so weak. If it were you, what would you do, Ray? Oh, Rickety asked. If it were me, I would be very unhappy and would want to change the situation. It was like a certain country. The people of that country were living very well in their own country, but one day, they went abroad and found that their countrymen were being targeted by others. Their lives were very miserable. Naturally, their first reaction would be very unhappy. That god is the same. He can't stand the humans being so depraved, so he wants to change the situation. The possibility of being human is the key. Ivan and Ray still didn't quite understand, but... Well, it's all up to you, Rick. We don't understand this. Ivan looked helpless. That's right, that's right. As long as it's Rick, I believe you can win. Ray looked at Rick like a fanboy. Let's go, Ivan. Ray. Let's go realize our possibility. Oh. Then the three of them left. Wooming's Huberic's figure walked out from the side. I don't understand. The possibility of being human is not recorded in the database. Huberic thought about this as he listened to the conversation between Wooming and Rick. When you have a heart, you will naturally know. You don't need to think about it. Wooming touched Huberic's head and said casually. Huberic nodded as if he didn't fully understand. Then, Huberic asked another question. Question, nameless. Is it God? Or is it acting? Huberic tilted his head and looked at Wooming. Ah, you mean that? It's not completely acting. After all, I really did bless the humans and was worshipped as a god by them. Wooming thought of the Yurok people. But compared to being a god, I prefer to be a traveler. The world is too big. It's impossible to finish walking, Wooming said with a smile. God, traveler, bless humans. Huberic muttered the key words. No one knew what he was thinking. That human named Rick is very good. I'm going to give you to him and stay by his side. I believe you will understand the heart. Huberic nodded again as if he understood. Then, Wooming looked outside. Outside, the elven skeleton continued to deepen. 3 figures were moving quickly in a certain direction. The environment continued to deteriorate, but the possibility of being human was being excavated little by little. Do your best, humans. Chapter 4:20. Rick went back with hope in his heart. Wooming and Hubletus quietly followed behind Rick and the others. What a joke. It was not easy to meet humans. It would be a huge loss if they did not follow them to figure out where the humans gathered. It had to be said that Rick and the others were really cautious. Wooming discovered that the place where he met Rick and the others was very far from their base. This was probably also for survival. If they were targeted by other races and needed to be sacrificed, they would not expose the hiding places of other humans. They came to a cave and watched Rick and the others walk in. Wooming speculated that this might be their base. Find a place to hide. Don't run around. I'll go in and take a look, Wooming instructed Hubletus. Wooming got Hubletus to hide and wait for him. Then, Wooming entered the cave in spirit form and followed Rick and the others. Ahem. After all, spirit form was quite practical. Moreover, Wooming's current body was created by himself, so he could naturally add extra small abilities at will. Spirit form, which could only be used by spirits, was easily done by Wooming with the help of the power of the origin and Wooming's understanding of spirit form. After all, the origin was the origin of everything. The reason why he did not add other abilities was that they were not powers that Wooming was familiar with. Adding them was quite troublesome, and even if he added them, he would not be used to them. Moreover, even if those super powerful abilities were added to this body, they would not be much stronger. Even Wooming's original abilities had been weakened, let alone other abilities. Therefore, Wooming only added spirit form to his body, and everything else was the same as his original body. Inside the cave, there was a long tunnel without any light, except for the torches that Rick and the others were holding. The top of the torch was not a flame, but a stone tied to it. This was a stone unique to this world. As long as it came into contact with water, the stone would absorb the water and emit light. It was very practical. The 3 of them each held a torch, as they walked through the seemingly long tunnel. Rick, who was walking at the front of the cave, seemed to have sensed something. He instantly turned his head and looked at the tunnel behind him. "What's wrong, Rick?" Ivan and Oren, who were following behind Rick, didn't seem to want to answer. Rick took another long look into the dark tunnel. "I'm fine. Let's go." He gradually landed behind Ivan and Oren, looking back from time to time. Gradually, the three of them went further and further away, leaving only the light of the torches. "This is really surprising. Is it a sixth sense, or is it just a simple sense of vigilance?" Wu Ming's voice rang out calmly. Wu Ming was still in his spirit form. Wu Ming once again cast a large number of concealment spells on himself before he felt at ease and followed Rick. Coming to the end of the tunnel, Wu Ming heard someone shout out these words excitedly. Wu Ming passed through the wall. Through his perception and eyes, Wu Ming saw the place where humans lived. This was a super-wide natural underground cave, but there were also signs of artificial modification. Countless colorful glowing stones decorated this natural karst cave, and in some places there was even land, with some grains that Wu Ming did not recognize growing on it. All kinds of humans were busy. Some were managing the land with grains, some were managing the terraced fields, and some were collecting water through special means. The houses were built directly on the mountain, making use of the independent space of the karst caves. This was a simple room, and there was even a stable that was used as a means of transportation. The humans lived in an orderly manner, almost like a small society. At the spot where Rick and the other two were, there were people who took away their item backpacks. A rose-haired girl hugged Rick, looking very worried. "Daddy!" At this time, a young voice was heard. A purple-haired girl ran towards the three of them and rushed into the arms of the uncle named Ivan. "Oh! Nong Na, did you listen to your big sister crone?" Ivan hugged Nana lovingly and asked with a smile. "Aha! Nong Na is very obedient to big sister crone. Nong Na also knows how to write Nong Na's name. Look, Nong Na wrote it herself," Nana said as she picked up the unknown paper in her hand and showed it to Ivan. "Oh, haha, as expected of my daughter, you can write your own name. Daddy is proud of you." Ivan smiled from the bottom of his heart and stroked Nana's head. He, Nana laughed happily. Seeing this scene, Rick's heart was filled with uneasiness and shame. If it wasn't for the god who came in time, Nana probably wouldn't be able to see her father again. Rick lowered his head in self-blame. "Rick, what happened?" The rose-haired girl frowned as she looked at Rick, who had his head lowered. "It seemed like a lot of things happened." "It's okay, Crone." Rick shook his head and looked at Crone with fighting spirit in his eyes. "Really? I told you to call me sister." "Well, forget it. Being able to return safely is better than anything else. Welcome back, Rick." Crone looked at Rick with displeasure at first, then her expression relaxed and she smiled at Rick. "Yes, I'm back, Crone." Seeing this scene, Wu Ming nodded with satisfaction. Saving that human named Ivan wasn't in vain. Wu Ming in spirit form nodded with satisfaction. Then he didn't look at Rick and the others anymore. Instead, he left the place and went outside to meet up with Zayubarak. On the top of a slightly higher mountain nearby, Wu Ming and Zayubarak looked into the distance. "Hey, Zayubarak, I think you should enter the lives of these humans," Wu Ming said without turning his head. Answer: Zayubarak has been abandoned by the Kikai race. How to deal with him is the power of the current owner of Zayubarak, nameless, Zayubarak said calmly. "Your words are quite ambiguous. I'm not your master. Remember, no one can be the master of others, not even you, the Kikai race, because you are a race that is about to have a heart." Understand. Can't. Data flowed in Zayubarak's eyes as he stuttered this sentence. "Well, you won't understand even if I tell you now. When you have a heart, you will understand without a teacher." Wu Ming smiled as he stroked Zayubarak's head. Wu Ming firmly believed that after living with humans for a period of time and with Wu Ming's guidance, Zayubarak would be able to understand a heart and have feelings. Because letting machines have feelings was one of the possibilities for humans. Chapter 421. Because of his bet with Wu Ming, after a few days, Rick didn't continue to stay in the base. Instead, He chose to continue collecting information. Perhaps because he didn't want anyone else to die, Rick didn't bring anyone else with him this time. Instead, he rode a horse-like means of transportation raised by humans and took the first step to prove the possibility of humans. Wooming and Hablitus naturally followed after seeing Rick leave. "This is a great opportunity to send you into human life through Rick," Wooming said. Not only that, but Wooming was also curious about where Rick was going next. In this era where one could die if they weren't careful, it was impossible for humans like Rick to go out without prepared information. Flying in the sky, Wooming looked at the fully armed Rick with his superhuman vision, as well as the bags of food and water hanging from the beasts that functioned like horses. He easily deduced that Rick was going somewhere far away. A means of transportation for long-distance travel and at least 5 days of dry food and water. It didn't look like he was going for a casual stroll. Rick stopped moving forward and looked behind him vigilantly, making a puzzled sound. But it was obvious that he didn't find anything, so Rick continued on his way. "He's quite vigilant," Wooming said while flying in the sky and relying on the concealment technique. Wooming and Hablitus relied on the concealment technique to fly in the sky from the beginning. Not to mention Rick, even other races might not be able to discover Wooming and Hablitus who were concealed by Wooming's technique. It seemed that in this era, not being vigilant would really lead to death. This time, Wooming was extra careful. He and Hablitus flew at a higher altitude and followed behind Rick. After following Rick for almost half a day, Rick finally stopped changing his route and began to accelerate towards a certain place at full speed. Because the Earth had become the battlefield of various races, Rick kept changing his route. Perhaps it was because Rick had never been to his destination before, so he kept looking for the best route and marking it on the map. Wooming asked Zayubarik as he watched Rick move in this direction at the fastest speed possible. "Is there anything noteworthy in this direction?" Wooming asked out of curiosity. After all, Rick didn't seem to know how to change directions. Data flowed through Huberic's yellow eyes, which were like warning lines, before he opened his mouth to answer Wooming. Answer: Zayubarik's database shows that ahead is the abandoned old capital of the Forest Elves, Marilyn. Oh, Wooming was intrigued. According to the intel, the Forest Elves and Goblins were sworn enemies, and Rick's destination this time was likely to be the former capital of the Forest Elves. In addition, Rick had found some good intel from the Goblins' crashed magic airship, so Wooming felt that Rick's target was the former capital of the Forest Elves, Marilyn. As the saying goes, the one who knows you best is your enemy, so it was normal to have information about your sworn enemy. Therefore, Wooming wasn't surprised that Rick had found information about the Forest Elves from the Goblins' crashed magic airship. "I'm slightly interested in that place." Wooming's lips curled up. After all, even if it was an abandoned old capital, it was still the glory of the Forest Elves. It was like a gorgeous ruin that hid secrets. "Let's go take a look in advance, Zayubarik. What do you think?" Wooming asked Zayubarik. Answer: Zayubarik doesn't care. "Everything will be decided by John Doe," Zayubarik said calmly. "That won't do, Zayubarik. You have to learn how to think and ask questions. It's because humans know how to think that they can survive the war with other races. This is the prerequisite for you to obtain a heart, Zayubarik," Wooming said to Zayubarik as he shook his head calmly. After Zayubarik heard Wooming's words, the data in his eyes flowed again. After a few seconds, Zayubarik nodded. "Understood. Zayubarik. I understand." Zayubarik nodded. "Then, what do you think about us going to take a look first?" Wooming repeated his question. "I agree." Zayubarik isn't interested in the former capital of the Forest Elves. However, since John Doe wants to go, Zayubarik will accompany him. Zayubarik looked into Wooming's eyes and said seriously. Although Zayubarik seemed to be a little dependent on Wooming, Wooming felt that Zayubarik's current state was already very good. "Then, let's go take a look first. Please lead the way for me." Wooming looked at Zayubarik with a smile. Zayubarik looked at Wooming's smile and nodded. Then, 2 meteors streaked across the sky. Because of the increase in altitude, Rick didn't notice that something was wrong and continued to move forward at full speed. However, even if Rick was riding a vehicle, it was still too slow for Wooming and Zayubarik. About 10 seconds later, Wooming saw a dilapidated city. Wooming and Zayubarik landed in front of the old capital of the Forest Elves, Merlrin, and walked in through the gap. "It was attacked, right?" No wonder it was abandoned. Wu Ming looked at the traces of destruction inside Merlin. It was obviously not the power of nature, but man-made. Answer. According to the records in the database, this place was attacked by the skywing species, Zayubarak said calmly as he followed behind Wu Ming. Skywing species? No wonder it was destroyed like this, Wu Ming said knowingly. It could be said that the buildings in Merlin were basically destroyed, and there was no complete building at all. I'm afraid Rick will be very disappointed if he comes. After all, there was no doubt that Rick's purpose was to search for information, and it was unlikely that there would be any information in Merlin that had been destroyed. Unless the forest elves used magic to protect the information. Then, Wu Ming saw a complete sea of flowers filled with elves. There was no doubt that this place was protected by the forest elves' magic. There really is a place protected by magic. Wu Ming and Zayubarak walked over. Places protected by magic are usually the forest elves' treasure troves, laboratories, and other valuable places. Zayubarak explained to Wu Ming as he followed Wu Ming to the center of the flower bed. Are you saying that we've caught a big fish? Wu Ming's lips curled into a smile. Then, Wu Ming used magic to open the door on the floor. Want to take a look together, Zayubarak? The reason why Wu Ming sent an invitation to Hubarak was because there might be a trap below, which represented danger. Agreed. Zayubarak will work with John Doe. Then Wu Ming and Zayubarak walked down the exposed stairs and went underground. The laboratory-like scene entered Wu Ming's eyes. Chapter 422. Wu Ming saw a laboratory-like scene full of forest elves technology. There was a huge mainframe that looked like a human brain wrapped in purple glowing vines, as well as several giant pillars engraved with a large number of flashing purple tactics. There was also a screen-like display on the ground with a large number of forest elves' words reflected on it. The entire space was immersed in purple. Hint, this is likely to be the development site of the forest elves' new weapons, Hubarak said to Wu Ming as he looked at the giant pillar engraved with mysterious runes. Can't Hubarak understand these runes? Wu Ming asked. The runes of Canas are not in Hubarak's database. Hubarak shook his head. In this regard, Wu Ming did not show any disappointment. Wu Ming had almost guessed it. Walking forward and coming to the screen on the ground, Wu Ming infused it with magic power. The entire room lit up, and all the instruments began to operate. Seeing such a scene, Hubarak was puzzled. Puzzled, why can John Doe reactivate the instruments powered by elves? Hubarak, who followed Wu Ming, now knew that Wu Ming, who came from another world, did not have any elves in his body. Logically speaking, he should not be able to use the instruments of this world. Wu Ming smiled slightly at Hubarak's question. It's considered my own ability. In the beginning, after Wu Ming sensed that there was no magic power in this world, Wu Ming was indeed unable to use magic and spells that required magic power. However, the energy elves of this world were also products of the Big Root. Therefore Wu Ming, who was of the same origin as the Big Root, could also be said to have the ability to use elves. It was not difficult for Wu Ming to use the elves floating in the atmosphere, but it was a little troublesome. After that, after Wu Ming adapted to the power system of this world and found that he could act as a sprite of this world through the magic power in his body, Wu Ming began to use the almost infinite magic power in his body. Well, this body didn't have unlimited mana. Although this body was created based on Wu Ming's original body, it couldn't imitate the characteristics of the root dragon. However, it had enough mana. To put it simply, the energy I possess can be of use to this world. It's that simple. Wu Ming stopped looking at Hubarak, who was nodding his head like he didn't understand. He started to study the host. On the large screen, countless words and a large number of unknown formulas appeared. Logically speaking, Wu Ming shouldn't be able to understand them. But now, Wu Ming was concentrating on reading. Wu Ming knew that this world was different from the world he was familiar with. Therefore, after getting familiar with Hubarak, Wu Ming asked Hubarak to teach Wu Ming the various languages of this world. Hubarak, who had a database, naturally knew most of the languages. In addition, Hubarak was now Wu Ming's main focus, so Hubarak easily taught Wu Ming all the languages he could teach. Wu Ming didn't disappoint Hubarak's teaching and quickly learned most of it. Therefore, Wu Ming could still understand the languages of ordinary races, such as the language of the forest elves on the screen. The Zeroth Void Blessing Theory Verification Experimental Furnace. Wuming read out the name of the experiment. Wuming couldn't even understand the name of the experiment personnel, let alone the name of the experiment. Ciphertext? Wuming could more or less guess why he couldn't understand it. After all, it was a new weapon experiment, so the experiment content should naturally use ciphertext. However, deciphering these ciphertexts was only a matter of time for the Kikai race Huberic. Huberic, come and help me. After hearing the call, Huberic, who was still looking at the mysterious giant pillar, walked toward Wuming. And as if Huberic's arrival had triggered some mechanism, the purple vine wrapped around the Cortex Prime instantly glowed, and countless light swords appeared out of thin air. A trap? A defensive tactic? Wuming looked at the light swords that were already flying toward the two of them. Wuming could sense that there were a large number of elves in these light swords, and they were likely to explode if they hit the target. Thou hast violated the contract and brought evil to the world. Lord's Day. Sinners shall be punished. Shatter their backs, dig out their tendons, bones, hair, and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am one who cannot be approached by darkness, I will obey the words of the Lord and destroy thee. After reciting the words, a purplish-black fog appeared around Wuming's body. Wuming's heart needle pointed in the direction of 5 o'clock, and the stone plate that represented annihilation lit up. The purplish-black fog instantly attacked the light swords, and in an instant, it was as if the purplish-black fog had devoured them. These light swords didn't even make a sound, let alone explode. Annihilation theoretically could devour and destroy everything, as long as Wuming knew how to use it. Immediately after, Wuming once again controlled the purplish-black fog to suddenly attack Huberic. Huberic looked at Wuming in confusion, but he didn't resist. Instantly, the Cortex Prime emitted light and touched the purplish-black fog that enveloped Huberic, but the purplish-black fog instantly eroded the light. As expected, the experimental furnace has been activated, Wuming said knowingly. Wuming stopped injecting magic power into the apparatus, and immediately after, the brain-like experimental furnace dimmed as if it had run out of energy. This was like a laptop. After taking advantage of the situation for a long time, the computer ran out of battery. Even if it was connected to a power source, if the power was immediately cut off, the computer would quickly run out of power. Are you okay, Huberic? Wuming removed the mist of annihilation and asked Huberic. Huberic shook his head. The reason Wuming had enveloped Huberic with the mist of annihilation was that Wuming had deduced that Huberic was likely to be attacked. This was the laboratory, and it was Huberic who had activated those defensive spell light swords when he approached, so Wuming believed that Huberic would definitely be attacked. Thus, he used the mist of annihilation to envelop Huberic. Sure enough, although the light just swept past Wuming, it seemed to only target Huberic. If one were to talk about the biggest difference between Wuming and Zayuberic, it would be the energy in their bodies. Wuming's energy was magic power, while Huberic's energy was elven, so Wuming guessed that this weapon was likely to be in existence that targeted elves as a mid-tier force. I've almost guessed the principle of this thing, but to fully understand it, I still need your decryption. Wuming stroked his chin and looked at the experimental furnace. Looking at the time, Rick should be here soon. I'll go meet him. You can stay here and help with the analysis. There's no danger anymore, Wuming said to Huberic. If it was just one person, Wuming could show himself. After all, he couldn't keep sending messages through the void. Understood, Huberic replied. Right. Wuming, who was walking toward the entrance, turned his head and looked at Huberic. I was protecting you just now. This is also a manifestation of the heart. After that, Wuming left the room, leaving behind Huberic, whose eyes were constantly revolving with data. Protect the power of the heart. Chapter 423. Wuming left Huberic in the lab after confirming that there was no longer any danger. He then went out of the underground lab and arrived at the entrance of Melon City. As expected, Wuming found Rick already there. Rick found a safe place to hide his mount and then began to explore the old city. Although it was called an exploration, in reality, the houses here had basically collapsed. Rick had come this time hoping for a fluke. Even if it was an abandoned old city, it was still the old city of the forest elves. It was unlikely that they would leave anything behind. At this time, Rick also discovered that these places were destroyed by humans. This kind of destructive power doesn't seem like it's from the goblins. Sky wings, Rick judged. It had to be said that as the leader of the humans, Rick had mastered a lot of abilities. Strong vigilance, extremely calm mentality, disguise, deceit, numbing oneself, and the cruelty of sacrificing the small to save the big, as well as the characteristics, strengths, weaknesses, and abilities of each race. Although it was not comprehensive, Rick had collected most of it. Rick did not have any extraordinary talents or abilities, but as a leader who led the other humans to live in this annoying era, these were all necessary. If he did not master these, he would not be able to survive. Simply put, he was forced. No one was willing to be born to deceive and suspect others, and Rick was the same. And the reason why Wu Ming knew this was because Wu Ming had seen it the last time they met. From the beginning, when Rick, Ivan, and Wu Ming came on the Goblin's fallen magic airship to saving Ivan and leaving after talking to the three of them, Rick's performance as the leader was seen by Wu Ming. Wu Ming could only say that Rick was not the best leader, but Rick was the most suitable leader to lead the other humans in this era. After Rick checked the buildings that were not intact, he quickly searched for any strange places. Soon, he discovered the Sea of Flowers and the underground passage that had been opened. Someone has been here? Could it be the forest elves? Rick was shocked. After all, under such circumstances it was unlikely. No, it was impossible for humans to come here. Compared to other races, it was very likely that the forest elves would return to retrieve the materials that they did not manage to take away in time. Don't worry, there are no forest elite species coming. Suddenly, a young man's voice was heard. Rick immediately pulled out the dagger at his waist and turned towards the source of the sound. Rick saw a man wearing a black cloak with a hood. The fat cloak covered the man's entire body, and his hands were hidden in the cloak. Even his body was not exposed. Rick could only vaguely see the man's heels at the bottom of the cloak that was about to touch the ground. The wide hood basically covered the person's face. His hair, eyes, nose, and other body parts could not be seen. The only things that could be seen were his mouth, chin, and the voice just now. It was impossible to tell what race he was from. However, Rick's attire was similar to his opponent's. He wore a hooded cloak that covered half of his body, a pair of thick goggles that covered his eyes, and a scarf-like cloth that covered his mouth. Only his calves and hands were exposed, and Rick held a dagger that shone with a cold light in his hand. Who are you? Rick's previous panic seemed to be fake. He instantly adjusted himself and coldly asked the person who had come. Rick did not notice the man's arrival. If the man did not speak, Rick would not even know that there was someone behind him. To be more specific, the man in front of Rick gave him a sense of illusion. If he did not see him with his eyes, it was as if the man did not exist. There was no breath at all. The man was, of course, Wu Ming, who cast a lot of shielding magic on himself. There was no breath because of the effect of magic. Why don't you recognize me? Then how about this? When Wu Ming said the last three words, he used magic to change his voice. His voice immediately became the voice that Rick was familiar with. He had seen him a few days ago. The god from the other world? Rick was shocked at first, but then he calmed down and put the dagger back into the scabbard at his waist. Why? Are you not afraid that I will hurt you? Wu Ming said to Rick with his original voice. There is no need for that. According to the rules of this world, you are a type of god. Even the weakest type of god is not something that a mere human can deal with, Rick continued after a pause. Moreover, even if you are a member of any other race, you are stronger than humans in terms of fighting. If you want to kill me, I will not be able to stop you. What Rick meant was that no matter who the man was, he could not defeat or defend against his attacks. Moreover, the man would not kill him, so there was no need for him to defend himself. Moreover, you actually want to help humans, Lord God from the other world. Rick took off the blindfold, the cloth that acted as a mask, and the hood, and looked at Wu Ming. Oh, why do you think so? Is it because I said that I am a god that protects humans in my world? Wu Ming asked. However, Rick shook his head without hesitation. Of course not. I am not stupid enough to believe the words of an unknown person. Rick showed a proud expression. However, you still made a bet with me, who is unknown and has insufficient information. Wu Ming's words were like a sharp knife that pierced Rick's heart. Rick stood there awkwardly. I promised you to protect Ivan and all. It was an expedient measure, ah. Rick touched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. However, there is no reason to reject a bet between men. Am I right, Lord God? But in an instant, Rick regained his cold expression. In fact, even if Rick did not say it, Wuming understood. For someone like Rick, how could he not understand the meaning of Wuming's words? Whether it was Wuming saving Ivan, or the conversation with Rick, Rick felt the goodwill of Wuming. However, as Rick said, how could he easily believe the words of an unknown person? Let's assume that if Wuming was planning to deceive Rick and others, then as long as they followed Wuming's intentions, they would be fine. And if Rick did not bet with Wuming, then it was likely that Wuming, who wanted to deceive Rick and others, would be angry. If he could not achieve his goal, these humans would be useless. Then Wuming, an unknown person, would likely have this idea to directly eliminate Rick and others. Therefore, Rick chose to bet with him. As if knowing that Wuming already knew his thoughts, Riker went on to say, "In fact, there is a more important reason why I bet with you, and that is the content of the bet, the possibility of humans." Chapter 424. The possibility of humans was an extremely vague statement. The definition of possibility referred to the probability of something happening. It was a quantitative indicator that predicted the development of something. It was an objective proof, not a subjective proof. But the possibility of humans, which aspect did it refer to, or all of them? One had to know that the more confusing the contents of the bet, the higher the chance of winning. The question of the possibility of humans had many meanings, but both Wuming and Rick had the same idea. You want to bet on the future of humans, right, Lord God? Rick stared at Wuming. I don't know if you didn't want to hide it or purposely revealed it, but your intentions are too obvious. It's so obvious that even I want to suspect you. Rick smiled as if he was talking to an old friend that he hadn't seen in years. But, you still made the bet with me, didn't you? Wuming said directly. Ah, you're right. Rick closed his eyes. No matter how suspicious Wuming was, no matter how dangerous Wuming was, no matter how numb Rick was, no matter how scared Rick was, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Humans that are not valued, humans that are ignored by other races, humans without power. I really want to see their expressions of anger after their plans are ruined by humans. Ha ha ha. Rick seemed to have thought of something happy as he laughed happily. Rick didn't know how to end this war, and he didn't have the power to end this war. But collecting information and waiting for an opportunity to come was the way of the weak. And Wuming was one of the opportunities. Because of Wuming's bet, Rick woke up from his numbness of, let humans live. Just because he was weak, he couldn't interfere with the strong? Stop joking. Even if I'm weak, I want to prove to you the possibility of humans. Rick stopped laughing and looked at Wuming with fighting spirit. Clap, clap, clap. Wuming clapped his hands. You've really impressed me, Rick. Seeing that the leader of humans had such fighting spirit, Wuming felt that there was hope to change the world. Then let me tell you how to end this war. Wuming took off his hood and looked at him. Now, humans had grasped the future. Because the god spirits were not satisfied with being on the same level as other gods, the gods began to fight with other gods. Countless races created by the gods also began to fight with the gods. The Elven Corridor had answered the wishes of the gods to make this planet the place where they were born. Thus, something called the Celestial Cup appeared. Star Cup. Rick asked doubtfully. Rick and Wuming walked down the stairs of the underground laboratory. Wuming explained the story. Ah, that's right. It's the Star Cup. Wuming narrowed his eyes and continued to explain. Only when the gods of this planet decided on the strongest person would the Star Cup appear from the Elven Corridor underground. The strongest person who obtained the Star Cup would become the only god. In other words, these thousands of years of war were actually because of the selfish desires of the gods. Rick fell silent. Because of the selfish desires of the strong, human families were destroyed. They were not valued and were trampled on. They were even treated as food, test subjects, and laborers. I don't think I'll forgive those people. Rick shouted slightly crazily. He hammered the steel wall beside him with one hand. Traces of blood flowed from Rick's hand that he did not remove from the wall. Wuming cast a few healing loon runes and Rick's hand was healed. This is the law of the jungle. The strong decide everything, and the weak can only accept it, Wuming said calmly. And often, the weak that the strong do not pay attention to will be killed. There were countless examples of the weak defeating the strong. Therefore, Wuming would not underestimate anyone. Even if he looked down on them, he would take them seriously in his heart. By the way, aren't you afraid that I'll think that you want to use us humans to help you obtain the Star Cup by telling me all this? Rick looked at Wuming. However, Wuming just shook his head calmly. There's no need for that, Wuming said calmly. Firstly, I'm a god from another world. Whether I can use the Star Cup of this world or whether I have the right to obtain it is still unknown. Secondly, I'm very strong, Wuming said as he looked into Rick's eyes. Perhaps you might think that I'm a little arrogant, but according to the information I've obtained, in this world, in terms of combat power, only the creator of the Skywing race, Arthas, who is known as the god of war, can fight me. Wuming's words shocked Rick. Rick had some understanding of Arthas. The god who created the Skywing race was said to have the strongest power among all the gods. He was the strongest god of war who had killed other gods with a god-slaying weapon he created. Hey, are you for real? Are you that strong? Rick looked at Wuming with an extremely shocked gaze. Although Rick also knew that Wuming was not weak and was very likely a powerful god, he could not help but be shocked that Wuming could fight with Arthas, the creator of the god-slaying weapon. Then I'm really sorry. I'm that strong. Wuming half-jokingly shrugged helplessly and continued to walk down the stairs to the basement. The reason why Wuming said that was because of Wuming's speculation. Back then, Wuming had asked the dragon spirit what rank it was in this world. The dragon spirit half-weakly said that it was almost on par with the strongest god, Arthas. Of course, Wuming did not easily believe the one-sided words of the dragon spirit. After that, Wuming asked for some other information, such as the strength of the dragon spirit and the strength of the Kikai race. After becoming familiar with Habletus, Wuming also asked Habletus about it. The database shows that the dragon spirit doesn't lie. They are a race that purely respects the strong. This was Habletus's original words. Speaking of which, Habletus also told Wuming some information about the dragon spirit. It could use its past and future power in the present, manipulate time and space, and transfer injuries to the past or future. It could be said that it was extremely difficult to deal with. The dragon spirit whose bones were broken by Wuming's punch was defeated because it underestimated the enemy and fought head-on with Wuming's giant incarnation. The reason why the dragon spirit did not transfer its injuries to the past or future was actually because of the law of the jungle. However, Wuming always felt that the other party was afraid that he would punch him again, so he gave in. Thinking about it, if the dragon spirit seed got up again, with the situation at that time, Wuming was likely to give the dragon spirit seed another punch. Not everyone could block a phoenix and a giant. In short, Wuming inferred from the information that only Arthas could match him. Let's not talk about this for now. We found something good down here. Let's take a look together. With that, Wuming walked away. You guys. Rick muttered this word. Does he have companions? Rick shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He followed Wuming's footsteps and came to the laboratory. Chapter 425. This is. Rieker looked at the scene in the underground laboratory and said in shock. It wasn't that Rieker was excited when he saw the scene in the underground laboratory, but because of the current state of Zayubaruk. As everyone knew, Zayubaruk was a Mecha-Kai species and could continuously evolve. The Mecha-Kai species evolved from the 5 small square boxes. And now, Zayubaruk's appearance just happened to prove the theory of evolution. Zayubaruk's petite body floated in the spacious laboratory. Countless cable-like data lines appeared from the body behind Zayubaruk's hair, connecting to the brain-like mainframe in the laboratory. Several large screens appeared in front of Zayubaruk. Data flowed on them, all of which were data that Wuming and Rieker couldn't understand. There was no doubt that Zayubaruk was analyzing the content of the Zeroth protection of the void. These cables and other things were actually evolved. According to what Zayubaruk told Wuming, if Zayubaruk was completely liberated, he could rely on himself to form a high-tech attack spaceship like a battleship. According to Zayubaruk, those were all evolved. Although Wuming was very curious about how Zyuberic's body contained so many things, he could almost guess that it was nothing more than an independent space like Wuming's golden ripples. Kikai species. What's going on? Rieker looked at Wuming in confusion. It wasn't that Rieker suspected that this was Wuming's conspiracy or anything else, but he was suspicious of the Kikai species that had appeared at the moment. After all, the Kikai species all acted in groups, and their neural networks were all connected to each other. It felt awkward as if everyone shared the same brain. However, it was precisely because of this that making an enemy of a Kikai species was making an enemy of an entire race of Kikai species because their neural networks were all connected. This was also why other races ordered not to provoke the Kikai species. In addition to the other party's replication power, this was also the reason why other races ordered not to provoke the Kikai species. If you accidentally provoked a Mekai seed, countless Mekai seeds would immediately come looking for you. They didn't care about anything else. If you provoked them, they would retaliate. They would attack you without a second thought. Although a single Kikai species was not considered strong, this kind of species that was particularly united and acted in groups were the most difficult to deal with. Rick's mind began to wander after seeing the Mekai seed. Don't worry. It's not what you think, Wuming said. Naturally, he could tell what Rick was thinking. Fear was written all over his face. Hubletus is a Kikai species that I captured. After I captured it, the mainframe that it was connected to cut off its connection with Hubletus and issued a self-destruct mission, but I stopped it. So, there are no other species around this abandoned city except for the three of us. It had to be said that the Kikai race was a very rational race. They would not hesitate to give up when it was time to give up. When the captured party received the order to self-destruct, they would self-destruct. They were so rational that it was scary. However, I really can't compliment a Kikai species that was captured by you and can still listen to you. Did you use some kind of magic or something? No one would believe that a highly rational and team-oriented Kikai species would be captured by someone else. However, this was the truth. Kikai species are also creatures. As long as they can communicate and have self-awareness, it's not difficult to get along with them, Wuming said to Rick as he looked at Hubletus, who was floating in the air. Actually, Wuming had other reasons for being able to get Hubletus to use his words so smoothly. Wuming felt that Hubletus might have started thinking long ago and had a hazy feeling about the heart in his heart. After that, Wuming added fuel to the fire, and Hubletus and Wuming acted together. Wuming believed that even without his arrival and without Wuming's guidance to Hubletus could still obtain the heart through his own release. Wuming had such a premonition. After that, Wuming and Rick did not disturb Hubletus's analysis of the data. They just waited quietly and chatted with each other. Wuming told Rick the story of how he waited for him when he was a Hyunryong in the Uruk. The fact that humans were the first species and could use magic, especially peace, deeply attracted Rick. Your world is really interesting. If it's possible, I really want to go to the Uruk you mentioned to have a look. I still don't know what to hand over. Rick smiled awkwardly. Only now did Rick realize that he did not know Wuming's name. In their previous communication, Rick had directly called Wuming Lord God. My name? Lord God passing by, you can just call me Nameless. As a god who doesn't belong to this world, there's no need to remember it. Wuming gave a discount and laughed it off. Well, forget it. I'll continue to call you Lord God, Rick said embarrassedly. Rick also saw that Wuming did not want to say his name. Since the other party did not want to tell him, then he would not ask. At this moment, Hubletus's state changed. Hubletus, who was floating in the air, opened his yellow eyes that were like warning lines. At the same time, Hubletus put away all the cables connected to the laboratory's mainframe. Reporting, Nameless, I have analyzed the information of the Zeroth protection of the void. Hubletus landed in front of Wuming and said lightly, Zeroth protection of the void? This made Rick puzzled. He did not understand the meaning of this term at all. This is what I want to tell you, Rick. Wuming looked deeply at Rick. A moment later, Hubletus projected the information of the Zeroth protection of the void on the wall. This information, which was extremely precious to other foot therapists, was all exposed to Wuming and Rick. The Zeroth protection of the void was a new weapon tactic completed by other forest elves with the tactic power provided by the creator of the forest elves, forest god Canas. It was a weapon specifically targeted at Arthu and his kin, the Skywing species. However, although it was a weapon targeted at the Skywing species and Arthu, it was not that it could not be used against other races. The principle was simply to let the elves in the fantasy breed's body, which was a high-level life form, self-destruct, allowing them to erupt with tremendous power to deal great damage to the enemy. The various races were not equal. In terms of the elves' adaptability, they were divided into life form and living form. Powerful races such as god breeds, fantasy breeds, dragon elves, giant breeds, and skywing species were called life form, while the other races were called living form. In fact, to put it simply, the life form race was a powerful race with different natures from the living form race, while the living form race was a race weaker than the life form race. This is actually a weapon targeted at Arthu? Rick said in slight shock. Chapter 426. Through the self-destruction of a fantasy breed sprite, it can be used to attack Arthu and his skywing breeds. Its power is enough to destroy the divine marrow of a god. It's practically a weapon of the same nature as the gnome breed's marrow explosion. Rick said seriously. It was worth mentioning that the marrow explosion was information that Rick had found from the gnome's crashed magic airship. The abandoned city of the forest elves was also found from the same magic airship. The Zeroth ward of the void that Zayubarak had analyzed clearly showed that the power of this tactic could destroy the divine marrow of a god. However, he scoffed at this. If only it were that easy. At the very least, it would have to catch a god off guard and hit it. To explain, the divine marrow was actually the spirit core of a servant. The forest elves actually managed to research such a tactic without anyone noticing. As expected of the race that is best at using magic tactics, Rick said indifferently. It was unknown whether he was mocking or praising. Hint: the forest elves and fairy breeds once formed an alliance and researched a tactic to control the superior life forms. In the end, the skywing breeds were extremely dissatisfied, and the fairy breed city was directly destroyed. In the end, the research on the tactic to control the superior life forms failed. After all, it made sense to be able to control those superior races who thought highly of themselves. Once the forest elves and fairy elves successfully researched them, whether it was the superior races or other biological races, none of them would agree. One was that they were unwilling to be controlled. How dare mere forest elves control them? The skywing breeds with the most explosive and belligerent tempers would be the first to disagree. The other was fear. If the research was really successful, the forest elves and the superior life forms who were already watching and controlling them would be the end of the world for the other races. After all, the superior life forms were really strong. If they formed an alliance, the other life forms would definitely not be able to survive. Therefore, the matter of the forest elves and fairy breeds' research on controlling the superior life forms was discovered by the spies of the other races and spread among the other races. The fairy breeds had withdrawn from the war because their vitality had been greatly damaged by the skywing breeds. Their capital was gone, and the skywing breeds were still attacking. If they did not run, they would be waiting for death. Therefore, the fairies withdrew from the war and went into hiding. Wuming, on the other hand, felt that it should be the races that withdrew from the war and went into hiding because their gods were gone. In order to create their own Lord God, they had to fight. If they found out that their Lord God had been killed by the enemy Lord God, then what was the point of fighting? In short, according to Wuming's research and analysis, the forest elves did not seem to have used this weapon on the battlefield because there were no records. It was the same for the goblins' marrow explosion. The forest goblins and goblins were most likely using these newly researched weapons as their secret trump cards, preparing to use them when they least expected it. Then, this Void Ward Zeroth might very well be a modified version of the forest elves' failed research on controlling superior life forms, Wuming said. Then, Zayubalas nodded and shook his head. Answer. The possibility of this conjecture is very high, but we don't have any specific information, so we can't come to a conclusion. No matter what, this is an extremely dangerous tactic, right? Rick asked. Zayubalas nodded faintly. This is an important piece of information, Rick. Wuming smiled. Rick fell into deep thought. Since he could remember, humans had been hiding from place to place until his hometown was affected by the war. He was lucky not to die, and he searched for more humans. Everyone worked hard to survive. However, Rick slowly grew up and continued to work hard. However, Rick did not know what was going on. He worked hard and became the leader of humans. Since he became the leader, he had the obligation to protect humans. He would let them live. Rick, who thought so, gradually became numb after seeing the cruelty of reality. Again and again, he ordered those who looked at him with a smile to die. However, Rick kept comforting himself that this was to let more people live. This was for the greater good. However, in order to allow more of the 1001 people to live, sacrificing fewer 999 people, was that really for the greater good? Rick knew that this was another level of hypocrisy. Rick was numb. He was irritated, cried, gave up on himself, and even wanted to commit suicide. In this world, death was an escape, but he thought of the other people who were alive. They needed him as a leader, and it had been like this until today. In the past, people were constantly migrating. When they were affected, they quickly moved to a safe place and set up camp. However, in the face of the powerful tactics and weapons developed by the forest elves and gnomes, if the battlefield was near human life, then could humans still survive? They might not even have time to escape. However, there was no safe place in this world. The only safe place was the underworld. However, even if the soul came to the underworld, the dead body would still not be at peace in the human world. It would still be destroyed by the war that was comparable to a natural disaster. If this continued, next time, not only himself, but also his sister, Ivan, Ole, and everyone who was saved by Lord God, would die. Rick stopped thinking. Hey, Lord God, can you end this war? Rick lowered his head slightly. His bangs covered his eyes, making it difficult for others to see clearly. Rick had already given up. Even if Wuming really wanted something, as long as Wuming could end the war, he would do anything. I can. Wuming responded to Rick's expectations and said casually. The condition for ending the war is to decide the strongest person. Then I just need to kill all the other gods, and the war will naturally end. Wuming said coldly. With my current state, in a few days, I will be able to kill all the other gods. Wuming raised his fist and showed a tyrannical smile. But, is this really okay, Rick? Wuming said calmly. I have always thought that the war in this world can only be ended by the most insignificant power in this world. This is what I believe in. Although Wuming's purpose in coming to this world was to save humans, if he could see humans save themselves, then the humans in this world would not be destroyed. They would definitely be able to survive until the end. Rick was silent. He also wanted to end the war with his own hands, but he did not have the power to do so. Not to mention the gods, even the weaker demons and sea dwellers among the other races could not be defeated by humans. As if he had seen through Rick's thoughts, Wuming smiled and then said, Then Rick, let me tell you something. Defeating the other gods is not the only way to make the Star Cup appear. Rick raised his head when he heard that. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.